This episode is brought to you by the Insta Sommelier Medical app.
Oh my God! I've been hit and run.
So you're going to the hospital emergency room.
My arm, my leg.
Well, I've got bad news for you. You're probably going to be put on a waiting list after Granny's goiter, Little Chad's tummy ache, and the guy with kidney stones screaming for the sweet release of death. Instead, take your crushed pancreas to the emergency healing solution used by highfalutin ascot wearers just like you. The cultured and refined service that isn't about experimental medicine. It relies on suffering's universal solvent since higher civilization began, fine wine. When you have a medical crisis, just pull out your phone. You use your good hand there, sir. Then pull up the Insta Sommelier Medical app. Sign in. It's probably in your email. You change the password? Try the retrieve password leak? Then just tap the get help icon. You got location services enabled, right? Immediately, Insta Sommelier will dispatch a pharmaceutical professional to triage the damage and render aid in the form of a fleet of tastings of the world's finest wines. Relative to your subscription tier, you'll be feeling better and back on your feet. You'll be feeling better. And thank you, Insta Sommelier Medical app, for sponsoring the Rereading Wolf podcast. This episode is brought to you by the support of generous listeners just like you. You can learn how to be one of them at patreon.com/rereadingwolf. And thank you, listener patrons, for supporting the Rereading Wolf podcast.
Warning. The following discussion is deliberately riddled with spoilers and unhinged speculation on this nearly 40-year-old book, Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun. You can't read a Gene Wolfe story. You can only reread a Gene Wolfe story.
Welcome to Rereading Wolf. We don't pretend that this is the first time you and we have read these books. We want to understand them in as much detail as possible, and that means considering the works as a whole.
Hi, I'm James Wynn.
And I'm Craig Brewer.
Welcome back, Craig.
Hello. It's good to talk to you again.
Yeah,
I feel like even though we've been talking a lot, not everybody has been hearing us talk a lot. So
yeah,
we can take some breaks, but we've just been more behind the scenes. We're a few episodes ahead, so that's
right.
Good.
We've been downright chatty. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. I mentioned to you that the job has changed since I started it. Where as before, I would go in, I would, get down. I'm a technical writer in IT, and I would just, do my work and go. And now with this new job, it's more of a product owner. And it's not that it takes up my time, it sucks up my attention. I'm just always, normally I would be thinking about, what we're going to talk about. I'd be thinking about these communications from listeners. I'd be thinking about the chapter we're talking about. And now I find myself always thinking about that. And it's just wearying.
It's a shame when work actually requires work.
I know. I did not sign up for this.
I know. Yeah, that's what I'm wishing for the future. Get that universal basic income, and then everybody can just sit around and podcast about their favorite special.
The non-scarcity society. Is
exactly.
What we need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Charles Stross wrote some good novels, sort of that post-singularity, post-scarcity kinds of stuff. So he's a good suggestion.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here.
All right, lots of comments because we had a lot of time.
Yeah.
For comments to accrue. So, we're going to jump in.
Definitely. So we've got, and also a lot of people had a lot of thoughts just about this chapter as well. So True. It's like a huge wave. Maybe they were all having it, their wolf itch was just building up, and now they've letting us have it.
We try to be good about making sure to at least mention sort of anything that somebody spent some time on. So, but this time, if we missed somebody, we apologize.
I'm gonna tell you that I've kind of collected the stuff from when we were dormant and quiet, and the stuff that we get from emails and stuff that don't necessarily have to do with a specific chapter. And maybe we'll do a little a special episode just on that, because there's a lot of them and they're long. Yep. So let's see. First on Reddit, Neil Smith. He says, Welcome back. I'm glad to hear you two are well and happy to have another episode. Well, gosh, that's heartening. And
we live.
And not all that different from everyone else. Everyone is very understanding, very enthusiastic to be able to continue on this little journey of ours, trying to crawl along the bottom of this story and pick up whatever odds and ends we can. So he says, you express confusion on Marin lying about the people present. That is when Severian says, weren't there 3 of you a minute ago? And Marin goes off on a lot of woo-woo talk about inhuman spirits flying in the night. He says, I think it's much simpler than you make it out to be. And that's what you're tripping over. My take is that Marin is an inexperienced witch offered as an assistant to the Kameian, and Marin is trying to show off. I think Marin is playing on the witch's mystique in the same way that Severian plays on that of the torturers at times. Yeah. Like when Severian, tries to manipulate the innkeeper in Nessus, and later he'll try to daunt the lake people with him being a guild master, right?
Could be. And she definitely does kind of have that attitude of like, I'm going to say mysterious things, and I'm gonna,
yeah, she's always got her hand up. She's the student who is ready to talk about all that she knows. And then and the Kameian, she's a little bit rude. She is always putting her down. She can't, because she's like that, the Kameian can't resist correcting her, right? He says, Marin may be used to fooling people. Severian is a little too literal-minded for that, and Dork is a bit too savvy. I take Marin's look at the Kameian sort of saying, this is the way you do it, right? And the lack of response is no doubt due to the Kameian realizing that no one is fooled. The Kameian eventually makes fun of her, and she gives up and admits Hildegrin is there. And the Kameian is more likely to think that people who just show up at this time must be here for a reason. I think that Marin's comment about 3 seeing 2, 2 seeing 3 is one of those off-the-cuff things that a fake psychic would say. However, thematically, it's interesting because Wolfe likes to take these offhand comments and make them true on a different level, like Severian's earlier statement in the book that, quote, time has the property that conserves truth by making our lies into truth. Yeah. So which of the 2 is hidden? Both of the men, Severian by his cloak in the dark, Hildegrin by the roof in the dark. On the other hand, people borrowing a human seeming would be Jolenta, being visible, with an artificial appearance, and the Kameian, who we will find is not strictly human, but in disguise. Related to this, the idea of all the witches wearing masks, which is an interesting one, but not one I quite know what to do with. Okay.
So I think it's certainly all plausible. And I think, our confusion was just trying to figure out what's the best interpretation of that. So the simpler approach, Occam's razor may be best in that.
It's contrary to my inclinations, as everyone knows, but maybe that's it. Maybe it's just Marin showing off. Maybe so. It's not like I can come up with a better explanation.
No, and it definitely adds to the weirdness. I mean, that's one thing Wolfe often does is have somebody explain something incorrectly or just in a different way. Really, I feel like it's to add that extra layer of not quite being sure what's going on. But it may also be there just for the effect rather than necessarily for the clue.
Right.
Quite so much. Yeah.
And Neil says, I agree with Craig that Severian, the author, is giving his opinion that the witches ran because of the danger of being caught in the incident and dying like Hildegrin. I believe that's what Severian thinks, but he might not be correct. It may be as simple as, they were there to perform a task. Once ended, and especially poorly, they had no reason to stay and left.
Yep. Could well be.
Or there may be more to it. And Wolfe is trying to draw our attention to something, but I can't tell what. Overall, I don't think the surface action is difficult to understand here, but there's a lot of implications that I feel that I'm not quite catching. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yep. Obviously we know Severian feels like they're at the end of the book. He feels like it has something to do with the fact of who the Apupun Chow turned out to be, which maybe they didn't know. I don't know. We'll have to, other people have some ideas on that. But that's a pretty good, nuanced and humble take that I can appreciate. And also, of course, it won't satisfy me. So, Let's see. First person jugular, also on Reddit. Remember, we expressed gratitude that the play is at least over. And IPJ says, the play isn't over. The play is never over. When you're covering Earth a decade from now, we will still be in the play.
That's very true.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's true. Yeah, we'll have to rehash the play in Earth. Wouldn't it be nice if by that time I can understand the meaning of what's going on in the final act with Nod chasing Jahi around? But yeah, regarding the last chapter of IPJ, he says, this whole scene takes place on a raked stage, a slanted roof, and Hildegrin is hiding backstage over the apex, waiting for his entrance. If you imagine Snoopy's doghouse, Snoopy is lying on top, basically where the backdrop would be, and Hildegrin is ducked behind that. Yeah. He talks about some things that we're going to talk about in a bit in this chapter. And he has some ideas about stuff we've discussed from the Book of the Short Sun and expresses an interesting theory. Go to the Badger Again post in Reddit to check it out. He seems to agree with Neil that Marin is mostly showing off in front of the Kumeyan. He says, the Witch's Tower is just like a wolf story. All the unnecessary parts of the structure have been stripped away, and it keeps humming along. Regarding the Kumeyan saying death is nothing, and for that reason you must fear it, what is more to be feared? He says, that misunderstanding by taking a word in drastically different ways, nothing is both inconsequential and also oblivion, is extremely Shakespearean behavior. It's all a play, you guys.
Yeah, could well be. By the way, I love his handle, first person jugular.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see, also on Reddit, Mike Farrar is offering a Curiositas Earthus. He says, with each reread, it's become more evident to me that the Stone Town incident is a deliberate assassination of Hildegrin by Marin and the Kumeyan. And he says this is on order of the autarch. So that at least decomplicates the different motivations in this scene. Hildegrin, the autarch, witches, Baudelaire. He goes on. When he comes to ask for help in raising Apupunchau, he's isolated and alone, almost at their mercy. He thinks it's because Hildegrin witnessed Severian's resurrection in the duel. He says, Hildegrin is an early believer in the power and importance of Severian, unlike other eyewitnesses like Agia and Agelus, who believe Severian survived through deception. Vodalis doubts Hildegrin, but he probably told the autarch on the steel anyway. The autarch and Neri are concerned that word will reach out to the true enemies of the new sun, and so the witches are deployed and Hildegrin is neutralized. It's evident even on the first read that Hildegrin is Vodalis's most capable lieutenant, and his continued presence in the group would complicate Severian and the old autarch's later capture. He's too capable, he knows too much, he's got to go, so silencing Hildegrin is one purpose of the Stone Town incident. And the other, assessing Severian. By absorbing Apupunchau, that's an interesting theory about what happens, Severian demonstrates his power to the Kumeyan. Likely he's even the conduit through which she draws power to summon Apupunchau. Regardless, Severian passes her test and also serves as a cunningly employed weapon against Hildegrin.
So that's one of the Puppet Master type readings where everything is here. I mean,
it's all a plan, man.
Right. And the part I don't buy particularly there is that this was a way to get rid of Hildegrin, just because that depends on Severian getting close enough to
blow everything up, and Hildegrin jumping the gun. Although it was inevitable that Severian was going to get close enough, right? Because Hildegrin's plan was to help him haul Apupunchau back to Vodalis.
Yeah, it seems like enlisting strange witches to do a time travel ritual to get rid of a guy is a quite overly elaborate.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of other ways you can assassinate him. He's out and about. He's at the botanical gardens all the time, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
But the rest of it, I mean, not that I got to admit, not that I necessarily find it plausible that the Kumeyan is using Severian as the thing, but at least those motivations are that more sort of weird, mystical and, conspiratorial background thing. Maybe, I mean, we know as much or as little about what that would mean as anything else, but yeah, the Hildegrin, I don't know. I mean, I get where he's going, but it's a few steps too far away from what we actually see, I feel like.
Well, Mike also thinks that the witches serve as a kind of CIA, or probably more properly a Russian KSB, an organization in charge of spying, info gathering, and assassination. And he thinks he took this role, he says, after, quote, Emar expelled women from the Torturers Guild. The female torturers were transferred from their torturer duties to the secret police, and the brutality and promiscuous that could be explained by the fact that they are alphas with a license to kill, each as lethal and randy as 007.
Randy. Says, good. Randy is such a great word. Anytime it's used that way, it's just so cool and wrong, and there's no
well sort. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I love that. The idea of 007 describing him as Randy is pretty good. You could describe Severian as Randy also, right?
Yeah.
And from now on I shall. He says that, quote, the Witch's Tower's purpose and nature of the Kameian elude me. He has some short sun ideas as well. A lot of people like the idea and direction that Mike was going in without necessarily endorsing it. And, that's not a defeat, Mike. I used to chuckle at the idea that the body in the graveyard in chapter 1 could be Thecla or Severian's mother. And now I've come around to believing that it was, in a sense, both. And that the requirement that it be these people is pivotal to the novel. And so, frankly, this is the way great canonical theories are born, or in the case of many of mine, are stillborn. So, and speaking of, Neil Smith said, I agree that about the form that the witches have taken, kind of a Mata Hari guild. The masks may be something like a high-tech mask that would let you impersonate someone, like the agents that S.H.I.E.L.D. had, at least at one time. But the masks, like so many things on Earth, are old, antiquated, and don't function as well as they used to. I think he's talking about a Marin reference in Short Sun. Yeah. Christopher Taylor says, I also like this line of thought without necessarily buying into it wholesale. The big question I have is, what exactly is the relationship between Hildegrin and Vodalis? Does Hildegrin work for Vodalis, or does he work with Vodalis? As you say, he comes across a bit more competent than the rest of Vodalis's lackeys, but he also feels a bit more of a free agent. Of course, that could be just because we get to spend more time with him on the page than the rest of Vodalari.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he doesn't work for Vodalis exclusively because he has a business card, but he seems to be one of those consultants that Vodalis relies on heavily. He's covering a lot of territory between Nessus and the Stone Town. I've already said that I think Talos and Baldanders are working for him. I think they are the spies that were sent to watch Severian, and that Vodalis says lost track of him after Nessus. But of course, I think Talos is working for some other unnamed person as well, someone capable of knowing that Severian definitely will be with them at the play. Malrubius, maybe the Undine, I don't know. So Hildegrin could be working for others just as well. He has a storied past. I'd have liked to have seen some stories about him, but my experience regarding Adillo makes me believe that if there had been anything peculiar about Hildegrin, Wolfe wouldn't reveal it in the short story. So I see, regarding Mike's theory, Christopher says, the question of what the Vodalari might tell the Megatherians about Severian is also moderated by the question of how much the Vodalari are consciously engaged with the new sun question versus how much they're just useful idiots being manipulated. Mm-hmm. That's actually, that's a good point. But, the Megatherians probably have spies on Vodalis' team just as well as the Autarch is using, him as a pawn as well.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But I know it sounds weird to say that the cleaner option makes more sense in a Wolfe story, but just to have the Vodalari be dumb and make tools, it works better. It's like you've got all this otherworldly conspiratorial stuff going on that it Plus, it fits to me the sort of thematic of Severian saying, like, I was set on this quest because I loved the idea of Votalis, but I didn't know what he really meant. And it was just that he was sort of like a false image of something that was actually something bigger that I wanted to become. That makes a little bit more thematic sense over the whole thing to me than seeing them as, super in-depthly whatever. But I mean, they are, the Votalis does work with the Megatherians in the end, right? I mean, he's got the Ascians are connected to him. And so, by the end of Citadel, there is some wiggle room to make them out to be more than they seem like. Yeah.
Well, just the Undyne complicates everything you want to believe about the Megatherians, regardless of what it is you believe. She saves Severian. She goes and encounters him and says, what do you want from me? She says, just your love. We want you to love. That's a word that can mean a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. It could mean, what we want is for you to worship us. We want to enslave you. Yep. We want you to let us worship you. Anyway,
and I have a feeling it's probably would be all of those things.
Yeah.
It's because what they represent is this thing that, I don't think the Megatherians think they're wrong or evil. I think they're just, they're misled in what they think is good. And they want to control humanity. They might say it's for everyone's better benefit, just like, Ascians don't think that they're evil people. It's just that the, community is more important than the individual kind of thing.
I mean, Typhon doesn't think he's evil. He's
right. He's
just the most natural leader for the world.
Yeah, exactly. So.
From his comments, Mike obviously thinks that the Chamaean is the Camoena that the Hierodules mention in Sword of the Lictor. It does look to me like that person is one of their peers. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thought. Maybe we should just consider that when we get there. But then Christopher Taylor said, Carmentis is another name for the historical Chamaean Sibyl. So I don't think there's too much significance to the alternate name used by the Hierodules beyond underlying the historical connection. I think it might be more revealing than Christopher thinks. It could reveal something about the witches' association and interstructure. Carmentis was the Cimmerian Sibyl, not the Chamaean Sibyl, but she was a Sibyl. And Carmenta was the Roman goddess of childbirth, and that ropes in Camoena, who is also related to childbirth. I think my intuition to hold off until Sword of Lictor was the best choice.
Yeah.
But Christopher also says, Severian places her in the pro-New Sun camp along with Aniri, which indicates to me that she would do nothing to actually aid or advance the cause of the Volodilari. Well, maybe. I mean, but the Autarch is technically doing things to advance the cause of the Volodilari in a way. So, no. And because, they're working for him and they're working for the New Sun. They don't know it, but they are. Now, Christopher Taylor has his own thoughts. Okay. He says, let's start with the first question to be read in a Jerry Seinfeld voice. What's the deal with witches? Whatever the witches are doing, it seems reasonably clear that it is something to do with investigating timelines. The Chamaean, of course, is named for a famous oracle. A likely possibility is that they are somehow checking out alternative pasts and futures, seeing what causes lead to and what effects, and possibly vice versa. I kind of agree with this, as I think we'll see in this episode. He says, I've always wondered what exactly ties the witches to their tower. Severian's description of its decrepit state seems very appropriate for a folkloric witch, perhaps, but not a futuristic cabal occupying an influential position in the state. If the witches are using something that was located in the tower prior to its destruction that cannot be relocated and cannot be replicated elsewhere, that would explain their position. Well, one thing, Craig, I think actually does apply, and what that exists in the Citadel can't be moved, are those tunnels. And it could be that they are making use of that to their own ends.
Yep. Especially if the tunnels are how time travel works, and that's somehow how the Cumaean does her oracling is.
Or one other tool that she
kind
does
of
for her
yeah.
oracling, right?
Yep. Yep. Then that would maybe make sense. But yeah, otherwise the tower he's right. It's more that sort of folklore witch, but doesn't really have anything to do with the sort of Greek oracle aspect that she seems to have. That having her cave, that for the Cumaean seems right. But yeah, it's like, what's the line between the witches and the Cumaean? I don't know.
Right. Christopher goes on. He says, I don't know exactly what it is that the Cumaean is watching when Severian visits the tower, but observation of the movement of animals is key to many forms of classical augury. Well, that's good. And also, he says, isn't there somewhere where Thecla describes that some elderly aunt of hers keeping hairless rats as pets? The parallel to the Cumaean seems too blatant to be meaningless, but I really don't know what to make of it right now. I can relate. It was Chatelaine Lelia's hairless rats, by the way. Severian mentions them in the antechamber. Then he goes on. Anywho, reading the Cumaean as a sibyl provides a clear explanation of what the witches are doing with the babies they receive from the torturers. Christopher, no.
Hey, it's not Chris who did it. It's those ancient Greeks.
So he says, Severian, if I recall correctly, says that girl infants are given to the witches. He does not say given to raise, just given. Yep. I feel pretty confident that the majority, at least, of said infants are then used as subjects of augury. Slice them, dice them, put them in a prophecy.
It makes sense that it's kind of hovering there as a possibility. I don't know. Yeah, it's a very ominous possibility, but it's hard because too, at the same time, Marin seems like, well, here's a young witch. So we do have one example of somebody growing up. So a possible example. Yeah.
But he's, like he says, not all of them, but some of them. Yeah.
Yep.
And this leads him to his next point. He says, in a prior thread, I identified Severian's sister as Marin, but I no longer think so. This will be good, Craig. He says, at least not directly. Severian's sister died long before the narrative of the new sun even opens. Severian learns that his is a twin name when he meets young Severian and his sister Severa. Except, of course, he never actually meets Severa. She is already dead and appears on the page as only a psychic echo in the Alzabo. Similarly, if elder Severian's sister appears on the page, it is only via Alzabo. Marin could well have partaken of her, explaining her identification as Severian's sister in the Short Sun, but she could well not be the only one. I do have a problem with how this opens us up to everyone is Severian's sister theories, which I would hate every bit as much as I hate everyone is Severian theories. But unfortunately, I think the situation is pretty incontrovertible. Yes, Christopher is finding himself where I find myself often in theorizing. Right?
Yeah, that does open a huge Pandora's box of possibilities for what if somebody ate somebody, then that's why they seem like this person. And oh my God, that just becomes so complicated. Yeah.
I to be honest, that's how I think in one instance, at least, is how Severian's mother, takes part in this story. So,
I mean, our main character is now two people. So yeah, it's always there, I think, as a possible implication. Sure.
Yeah. And moving on, he says, Christopher says, reading the parallels between Severa and the elder Severian's sister is stronger than just one being an indicator of mere existence of the other. It also adds an extra resonance to Alzabo Severa being one of the few eidolons present at the trial in Earth to speak directly. The role of the witches as augurs also explains why they are regarded as counterparts of the torturers. Both are, as Long Sun labels the augurs, butchers. And actually, butcher is inherent in the name, in the word Madichin. So, okay, Craig, the idea, I got to tell you, the idea that Severian's sister is dead and that all the instances of her are eidolons or echoes is actually incredibly appealing to me. I hope Christopher doesn't think this is undercutting him. His sister is dead. She parallels Severa, whom Severian encounters through the Alzabo. Valeria is his sister. He encounters her while looking for a dog. She says, I am all the sisters we breed and all the sons. Craig, how many people are in Valeria?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is why Severian considers her such a suitable bride when he becomes autarch. She becomes autarch. We always consider her to be a faux autarch because she didn't take the Alzabo, but maybe not. Severian tells Odilo that Valeria did survive the flood. He says, she has survived. Believe me, I feel it. I still really like the everyone is Severian theories, but I can't get away from them. And I've long yielded to the Severian's mom is everywhere theory.
Yeah.
But I've been inching towards Severian's sister is everywhere, in reading this. Valeria, Marin, maybe Morwenna, Odila for sure. Maybe it's true. If we can only nail down a story to nail this all together, we kind of discussed at one point, well, maybe, there's some sort of timey-wimey thing so that Valeria is inside Severian's head when he becomes autarch. But I can't figure out how that would work, but it would explain why Severian suddenly decides, I'm going to go after Valeria.
Yep.
Christopher also thinks it's pretty clear that Aniri can't be a Hierodule in the matter of Barbatus and Famulamus. And I think the Chameleon is likewise distinct, he says. He notes that Baldanders says that Famulamus and Barbatus only live for a dozen years or so, and they appear to be around for longer in linear time due to their role as time travelers. Aniri's apparent long existence, however, could not be explained this way because he would not be able to maintain his function managing the Commonwealth in this way. The Chameleon could potentially manage, but it just seems somehow more satisfying to compare her to Aniri than to Famulamus and company, he says. So Christopher is going to note that Asapago is also a Hierodule traveling. So, maybe Aniri could be one of those, right? Maybe that could explain his long life. Yeah. Also, let's think about it. Aniri could still be like the others and only live 20 years or so. Christopher seems to assume that Aniri is just always around, but I think it's very possible that he's only around when people see him. And he was around for, Emar, and he's around a lot more now because we're watching the end stage with Severian. I'm just saying. Yeah. But it could be more like Asapago than Barbatus and Famulamus. Christopher also thinks, quote, that Aniri and the Chameleon have a lot more in common with the Megatherians than the Hierodules, and they could well be Megatherians that have defected from the Erebus Abia camp. Although I should note that I also support the proposal that the Megatherians are themselves rebellious Yasadis. Aniri seems to have thrown his lot fully in with the Commonwealth. The Chameleon may well be acting more as an independent consultant for hire, and that seems to fit with what she says in this chapter. So anyway, I have my own dog in this hunt because I have my own ideas about the Megatherians. So I'm going to let you take the lead.
Yeah, especially on the idea that they're somehow in line with the Megatherians just doesn't make sense because that's not the way they explain themselves. And yeah, it goes in such a different direction. It's also apparently not how the Megatherians work, like to sort of send these direct people to do it. So, because we've got the Undine who's doing her thing, and there's always the suggestion that they're like, wait, these cosmic forces behind the scenes rather than the sort of very enigmatic teacher kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They seem much more about, control rather than, yes, you could say that the hierodules are controlling in the sense of who they help, like, do they stop giving ballanders tips or something like that? But that's very different from basically, I guess, mind control, like we see with the Ashes.
Right.
It's already weird enough to try to sort of think about how the hierodules are connected to the rest of the Hyro clan, but then to suggest that they might also be Megatherians.
They could all be one people.
One big thing. Yeah. I like the idea of thinking that like the Megatherians are just like another faction of the Hyros. Don't think that's how Wolfe has set things up, and I don't know that there's anything else
right
that connects to it. So,
well, I do think that there are varying factions and interests among the Asadis. Still, if Ballanders isn't an unreliable narrator, then no one, as far as the age of the Hierodules, then nobody is, right?
Yeah.
Christopher says, as for why the Kumeyan seemingly does not realize exactly who Severian is, it could be as simple as her not expecting him. His appearance at the Stone Town could just well be an act of providence. Other than any machinations on her part, she may well have been there at Hildegrin's behest and only invite Severian to stick around on a hunch. Well, this is actually a contrary theory against Mike Ferrar's, that it's all part of a plan. I do think that the Kumeyan doesn't know what's going on, and actually, we'll get an explanation from Severian in this chapter that we're starting for why it is that Severian, just so happened to wander into the Stone Town, and that the witches were there, and so to speak.
Yep.
But I will say that at least the fact that she doesn't recognize him proves that the witches and the BFO Hierodules don't share notes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Christopher likes our discussion about Moorcock. I think this must have been on the blooper reel. He says, I found it interesting that you referred to the relationship between Gene Wolfe and Michael Moorcock. I read Moorcock's The War Amongst the Angels recently and was considering the contrast between the two authors without knowing that their paths had ever crossed. Both are known for their usage of language, whose meaning can seem to obscure on casual read, but their reasons for doing so are quite distinct. Wolfe seems to intend that there be something definite happening that the reader may take time to piece together. Moorcock seems to mostly use unclear narrative to establish a mood, with the obscurity being the point itself. Or to put it another way, Moorcock is the better example of what you quoted someone as accusing Wolfe of doing. Yeah. Let's see. Longtime journeyman patron Carl reached out to us on Patreon site to offer this interesting tidbit. Remember that in the Witch's Keep in the Citadel, Severian said he saw, quote, the Gnostic designs in white, green, and purple that had been chalked on the walls, but there was little furniture and the air seemed colder than outside. Carl notes that white, green, and purple are suffragette colors. And he wonders if this was intentional on Wolfe's part. Maybe it was, Carl. That's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. Now, also on Reddit, Mantis. Michael Andre Drusi was bestirred and had a lot of ideas. So let's see. He says, the Kumeyan might be precisely the Kumeyan of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. That is, the New Sun naming convention with saints for the good and pagan for the wicked. It gets into a gray zone, by the way, of Sistine Chapel. I got to tell you the truth. The Kumeyan in that is a whole series of prophets, I guess.
Yeah, there are a bunch of different ones. I mean, there's one that I think is usually considered the Sibyl, but there's tons of prophets in the Sistine Chapel all around the sides.
Let's see. He says, regarding Moorcock, we've wondered before how the Book of the New Sun might be a reaction to John Crowley's The Deep in 1975, but I think a stronger case can be made that it, in total, or narrowed down specifically to Dr. Talus's play, is reaction to Moorcock's Behold the Man, 1969. Not to be cryptic, he says, Moorcock's novel demands a working familiarity with a sacred text that is assumed to be known to all readers. And Wolfe's play assumes a familiarity with a sacred text that all readers ultimately discover they do not know at all.
Yeah. No, I like that. And Behold the Man always seemed definitely more like a thing. Because, I mean, okay, spoiler ahead for Moorcock's Behold the Man, even though it's not really a spoiler if you're at all paying attention. But yeah, it's a story of somebody who goes back in time and basically turns out to be Christ. And they get caught up in the story. And so it's the story of a sort of regular person who ends up becoming the actual true Christ. So it's a very weird kind of story, but it's also very similar to how Severian, is taking on this role of the Conciliator. So that one is both thematically and plot based is the most similar to these.
Yeah. So let's see. He's decided to take on a framing of this scene. He says, Hildegrin has hired the Cumaean who brought along Marin, presumably after borrowing her from the witches. Thus, 3 factions are involved. The Volari, which is the rebel, mystery, unknown, and the witches, servants of the throne. But they're also individuals separated from their factions. The tableau here, remember that Mantis is always building names for these tableaus here that he sort of repeat themselves or could have more meaning just in the arrangement of people. He says the tableau is hour of the seance, or more specifically, the hour before the hour of the seance. The trio were preparing their magical task, and presumably they had all the items required for the job when suddenly another trio came along out of nowhere. The Badger quickly went into hiding, either on his own or by suggestion of the Cumaean. The apprentice, trying to guess at the situation when her teacher fails to answer Severian's question about the third one, starts the lie about there being only 2. She fumbles it. This is kind of like Neil Smith's point, right? Her later line about powerful beings that choose to borrow human seeming is stronger. If the Cumaean had said it, I would be certain it was a prompt for Severian to admit himself such a powerful being, or for Severian to fear the sudden appearance of a big figure like Hildegrin as being such a powerful entity, an either-or setup. Severian's line about the amount of wine being large for just 2 is a jab at it being enough for 3. But in fact, wine sacrifice poured onto the ground might be part of the ritual. We just really do not know. There's a bit of, quote, the Witch of Endor to it. Marin's next strategy is to get the intruders to move. She's trying to stay on mission. The magic team must be at this location, the tomb of the person they intend to raise, so the intruders must move off. It is an echo of the grave robbing. Yeah, I definitely see this, Craig. It is an echo of the grave robbing. Hildegrin was there too. An echo of the Lake of Birds. I agree with that. Another grave robbing. Hildegrin was there. In addition to your notice of the echo of the mask wearing at treachery twins cut rate party supplies, where the twins misread him and went into lying tangents. The Cumaean finally weighs in and says that they can stay. I presume she was surprised by the arrival of the trio, but after watching, she has made a decision to go along with the additional people. I suspect that she can see the claw, but she is uncertain as to Severian himself. That old thing, wondering if he is an active agent or just an opportunist adventurer. Marin states that she has been shamed. I like this chapter for showing how awkward the magic users are when faced with surprise. Severian's rising sarcasm also deglamorizes the scene, making it seem like a con job, which lowers the expectation for the wow that is to come next. Yeah. That's a pretty good framing of the story. Yep.
And we get the sorcerer's battle later, where they have some kind of power, maybe, but they're also,
they fall into it, sort of, right?
Yeah, but I like that, how magic users here are all possibly incompetent. So even the Cumaean, maybe, like, she can do this, but doesn't really have control of the consequences. So
well, this is not a spoiler, but in the Book of the Long Sun, there is a repeated theme that when you pretend to be something, you have a tendency to become that thing.
Yep. Symbols make us.
So Mantis continues, regarding the enduring mystery of the witches, consider the three neighbors at the citadel, the beast handlers, the torturers, and the witches. Presumably the beast handlers are the best known, regularly going out of the citadel into various venues in the living city. It is a toss-up between the torturers and the witches as to which is more legendary, but the text shows how disbelieving people are that the torturers still exist, so maybe they are more legendary. So this is just a setup for how I think it is neat that Severian has so much mystery regarding his neighbor and sister guild, the witches, which is sort of like what the civilians have for his own guild. Yeah. So Mantis also does a lot of thinking about how much of this is like a normal augury, seance with that might involve actual sacrifices. He says it mightn't be as simple as just pouring wine on the ground. It might be a blood sacrifice. It might be an animal sacrifice. It might require human sacrifice. And he's going to get into that a little bit later. But he says if the requirement is blood, it will come from Marin. That would be the intent when they first arrive. If it's life, it'll come from Marin. With this stark fact, Marin's talk about there is no death takes on a different nuance, since it will be the same thing her mentor would naturally say to her to convince her to submit to the sacrifice. But then Jolenta shows up, he says, and she wants to die, which is an excellent quality for a sacrifice, where even the animals are made to nod in acceptance. Jolenta is already been placed on the sacrificial table and vomited up her impurities. Severian's arrival with Jolenta in this way fulfills the sacrificial substitute, a dark version of Abraham and Isaac. Severian has saved his sister. Severian will lose little Severian in a similar tableau where the version is even darker. Oh, yeah.
Very cool. I like how you can find all those analogies and resonances. I'm not sure if that's
where, if I do this a lot. I can put all these things together, but did Wolfe intend them? Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked Mantis, when you say that there was a sacrifice here, do you mean to say that the sacrifice is merely, quote, effective? That is, symbolic within the text. Yeah, there's a sacrifice and maybe there's some connectivity, but it's not what anyone intended. It's what the author intended, right? Or are you saying that the Achaemenid intentionally sacrifices Jolenta in order to resurrect Apopunchau? And because the reason I asked this was because the Achaemenid does say that she expects Jolenta to live, although she doesn't expect gratitude from her for it.
Yeah.
Mantis says, it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. Maybe it is a duck. And he argues that Wolfe does use fantasy-style magic-y necromancy in his stories. He cites Soldier of the Mist and Home Fires. As for why the Achaemenid says Jolenta will live, he says, I do not know what the Achaemenid had in mind initially. I don't think she was planning to con Hildegrin, but that is possible. Maybe she offered to take the job on a, best effort kind of thing, but that would weaken her reputation. And then again, the job is so enormous. Even now, I think we ignore how vast it is, even if deep time has any meaning. Typhon rises up without any ritual, but his death was recent compared to Head of Day. But, even then, there's a boy sacrifice that's linked to his rising. And this alone links to the sorcerers themselves and what they probably would have done with little Severian, the guys out in the jungle. I do not know, he says, if the Achaemenid was 100% planning on sacrificing Marin, or if it was just a contingency plan with an unspecified percentage chance of happening. I persist in seeing a menace that Marin herself might not be aware of. We are focusing on intention here, he says, but I am arguing that intention might be moot. The necromancer and soldier was a charlatan attempting a con, but the thing happened for real. Marin looks to me to be a potential sacrifice at a ghost-raising ritual, and Jolenta does really die.
Yeah, and I definitely see how you can find that stuff there, but I'm just not sure that I see the sacrifice really being necessary.
A plan. Yeah. Well, I mean, I find the only reason I find it so hard to really believe that is that I don't I do think this is a merge of science fiction and fantasy, but I always have seen this as tilting a little bit to science fiction, less than fantasy. And as I've said, how you view that tends to affect how you view a lot of the scenes in this book. And then a Neuromancer. He says, gentlemen, you express wonder at why Marin asked Severian and Dorcas to move to another location. I presume that at a minimum, the Cumaean informed her apprentice that they would be folding time in this place and that there are dangers in doing so. In the next chapter, we learn that the Badger, aka Hildegrin, has a contract with these mages. I presume these rebels striving against the autarch would of necessity insist on pledges of secrecy in their dealings with anyone that they seek to employ. This would explain the witches' dissembling and efforts to avoid making unnecessary disclosures while their high client is hiding just a few steps away and listening in. Imagine if the witches just made a totally blunt disclosure and says, hey guys, check it out. Hang out here with us. And we're going to be folding time. It's going to be crazy. and Hildegrin would just, freak out. And I can imagine the Badger jumping out of the shadows to shout, what?
Yeah.
What? Shut your mouth, you witches. Even if the Cumaean were to have, some foreknowledge that Severian, Dorcas, and Jolenta would be players in this scene, it doesn't mean that she would feel it necessary to disclose to her apprentice, Hildegrin, or to the three intruders in this space. Craig calls attention to the difficult path that the three travelers have to take to reach the three persons on the roof as just another clue that they have entered a region unstuck in time. And let's also consider the mystery of the stone town itself. It appears that the stone town was affected by several time passages made by Severian, by Asopago, Famulus, and Barbatus. And this time by Marin, the Cumaean, Hildegrin, Dorcas, Jolenta, and Severian. There's something about these repeated passages and ripples and resonance through time and space. As you read from chapter 29, the herdsman in the last chapter said, the ignorant eclectics who live near there believe that no matter which way a man goes, the stone town moves itself to wait in his path. And the herdsman laughs and says, no, the stone town bends the way a man's mount walks. It seems the herdsman is comparing the effect of the town to a kind of gravity that pulls travelers to itself, whether they mean to go there or not. Severian then remembers the botanic gardens in Nessus with its portals and halls and openings in the past time. So he's aware that travel to witness past eras is possible.
I like the idea that there is something about it that has a mind of its own, right? Like it's even if
just the fact that they're out there, that there's all this crisscrossing of time at this location.
And even if it's just destiny calling, like there's just this idea of, time and gravity that pulls things towards what they're supposed to be. That's just even if it's just basically in the end, kind of like a metaphor for predestination or something. I like it. I think it's cool.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about Vivimancers in this next chapter. And so I think there's a lot in there, a lot more than perhaps I've appreciated in the past even. He says that regarding the difference between the Cumaean and Father Aneri, he says it might be similar to the difference between the Hierophant and the High Priestess from the Tarot. Both are adepts, yet they access knowledge and the mysteries of the cosmos in different ways. I don't really know enough about Tarot to say anything thoughtful on that, but it's but if someone's got some comments on it, maybe there's something you can use from that.
Could be. We know that Wolfe was familiar enough with the tarot, at least and that's one of the major arcana, one of the big important ones. So yeah, he might know about that. Yeah, there's something to that. I mean, we're talking about all these different ways of different wise people who are into different, parts of the conspiracy. So yeah.
Regarding the question of whether the Cumaean is a Hierodule, as Severian says, Aneri told him she was. He says, on first reading, I wanted to believe the Cumaean to be one of the few true alien beings appearing in the Book of the New Sun. She appears to be unique, a reptilian, snake-like being, like a naga beneath her human-seeming form. But the notion evaporates in the light of Father Aneri's statement. When Severian relays this statement to the BFO Hierodules, they nod in confirmation. So now he has his own Curiositas Earthus. He proposes that the witches do not originate from the Torturers Guild, but have a separate origin. He says, I consider the Kumeyan to be a hierarchical recruited by the ancient autarchs to establish the order of witches. This raises the question, why does the Commonwealth need witches? And I suspect it is because the autarchs are contending against forces which can gain future or past knowledge and intervene through time. The witches are the autarchs' necessary counterforce of time warriors, ready and able to do battle against the Megatherians' effort to reshape time to a favored outcome. The shrieking and light changes coming from the witches' keep are likely due to shattering disruptions of time and space occurring as the witches transport their agents to and from the corridors of time. If such battles through time truly occur, this could also explain why the witches need to keep replenishing their ranks.
They're time lords. They're doctors.
Yeah, or it's kind of in keeping with Mike Farrar's theory that the witches are like a CIA or something like that, right? I think Christopher Taylor is Randy 007. So, and actually he does connect this directly to Mike Farrar's comment on Reddit, which shows he's reading it, even though he's actually talking to us on the Patreon site. Aniromancer says, by removing Hildegrin, or allowing him to be extinguished due to the literal time pressures, the Kumeyan and Marin preserve Severian's life and timeline, and thereby thwart an agent of Vodalus and the Megatherians. Hildegrin's willingness to risk time travel to gain strategic advances makes him just the kind of threat that I assume the witches were created to oppose. This is good, and it does interlace nicely with Mike Farrar's theory. I confess, Craig, I just think nobody is this competent in this story.
Yeah, it's the old, like, the conspiracy things where, they'd have to be like mega competent and far more powerful and start.
I think only Severian at the end of Earth the Due Sun is really that competent, but even he doesn't really understand himself, I think, in many key ways.
Right.
So
right. Cool to think. I mean, and honestly, if you do buy into the idea that all of this is being conspiratorially organized behind the scenes by Hyros or Iniri or whatever, then something like that.
You need a team like that, don't you?
Yeah, you pretty much, you like, otherwise it's all well and good if you imagine sort of being like, oh yeah, and there's a vast cosmological conspiracy to support it, but you just kind of hand wave. But if you want to figure out how it happens, you probably need something like this. Yeah.
And also Aniromancer thinks that this is why the witches are described as having such an aggressive sexuality. They're time warriors. They're frequently sent out on hazardous missions from which they might never return. So, they're like soldiers. I could die tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Maybe I wonder what Gerlo's experienced as his first, his first sexual experience with the witches. That kind of
if they were these
put
kind,
him off to the whole thing. Yeah.
So he would have been the Bond girl, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, that explains a lot too, doesn't it? And Aniromancer says that one can only imagine the feverish whirlwind that young Gerlo experienced as he ventured or was pulled into that fear-inspiring center of female occult power. Yeah. Mm-hmm. As for why the witches wear a mask, he says, I venture to assert that those ivory masks are the true uniform of the witches. Presenting a human face likely helps the Kumeyan disguise her alien nature and to pass acceptably when interacting with human beings. Let's note that the wearing of masks has ancient origins rooted in shamanism, magic, worship, and mystery rites. That is actually appropriate. I agree with that one.
You keep the crooks and charlatans in business bay. They do appreciate your patronage.
We are very happy to say a thank you to new patrons since last time. We have one new journeyman, Charlie Garrett, and 4 new master level patrons. First, Alex Feinberg.
That's fine by me.
Noah. Matt L. And Leo S.
Leo woke up in his bed again.
Thank you all so much for helping out with the donations. Remember, for $2 a month, you can get the Journeyman level, which gives you access to all the extra content. And then for an extra $5 a month, extra $3 a month, total of $5, you get the Master level, which gets you extra little gifts throughout the year and those so fun little Master clips. Check it out at patreon.com/rereadingwolf or check links on all of our social media. And with that, we are going to dive right into the episode. Chapter 31, The Cleansing.
All right.
And it's the final chapter of Claw.
The final chapter.
You know, the play and then the sort of little bit of fatigue after that, I think, has definitely made Claw last a bit longer. But I'm not going to celebrate yet because we haven't actually finished Claw yet. We still got this, and this is going to be a long one. You know, we were just talking about how this is probably going to be a two-parter because there's a lot going on in this chapter. There's a ton here, a lot to talk about, a lot
going on stuff as we do it. Right. We go.
Yeah. But also a lot of story. I mean, once you know what else is going on and tie up a punch out to the larger story and Severian's role here, there's a ton going on and lots of suggestions about world building in the background too. So there's a ton here. But yeah, last chapter of Claw. That's kind of amazing.
Bittersweet. And then, of course, we'll have the summary. And I have a lot, actually. I've been taking notes about all the things I've changed my mind about. and it is extensive. So, all right. Well, we better get on with it.
Okay.
So, because we are now probably, I think, 29 days since the Feast of St. Catherine. I've come to that realization or feeling. I think Feast of St. Catherine is on a new moon. And here we are just past the full moon, 29 days. It's hard to justify, time here. Times that are especially fuzzy, it seems to me, are the period between the Piteous Gate and the period between Votilus's camp and the attack on the Notchules and the period between Severian's meeting with the Undine and arriving at the herdsman's house. Maybe. I really feel like this is one of those things. There are periods in this story where I think Wolfe is deliberately trying to confuse us about the time. And I think that is reflected here. But here we get a final counting, I think. And it's now 29 days since Severian, his elevation is the correct one. And Severian left the Citadel 2.5 weeks ago. And Wolfe tells us at the end of this novel that the moon cycle is 28 days. So, yeah. So I think Severian talked to the Undine last night, and that would mean they partied with Talos and Baldanders the night before last, and the plague was 2 nights ago, and that means Severian fled from the Notchule and resurrected the Ulan 4 days ago. Severian and Dorcas and Jolenta have stumbled upon some witches in an attempt to catch Talos and Baldanders. They are trying to save Jolenta, but the Chameleon says, lucky you, it can be done, but Jolenta will probably not agree that she was lucky, at least not initially. And Severian said he saw 3 people, and Marin, the witch, lied, or apparently lied, saying that there were only 2. But it appears, and maybe she's saying, no, the Chameleon isn't a person. I don't know. But it appears that the third person Severian saw was Hildegrin. Mm-hmm. And the Chameleon has said that she will help Severian save Jolenta's life after they finish the ongoing business with Hildegrin, who suddenly reveals himself. And I think it's interesting that the Chameleon is anxious to help Severian, even though it seems likely she doesn't realize why he is significant.
Yeah, which for all of her otherwise knowingness about this, it is an odd point to me that she doesn't seem to recognize him or maybe even know who Apu Punchao was. And I think I'm right about that she doesn't seem aware that something big is going to happen. And Hildegrin even talks about how she's kind of
playing both sides, and he talks about her in a way that makes her seem not quite so omniscient. Like, I think when you first read her and there's so much going on, there's this sense that the Chameleon is somehow some kind of all-knowing something or other. I don't know that she is really, because Hildegrin says that she owes him a favor, and
and he does. Apparently he does. He runs favors for
her. Yeah. So there's definitely more of a worldly thing. And he even talks about how, she's friends with Father Aneri, because he says something, and we'll get to this, but something like, even if she's playing for the votalist side, it's good to have friends on the other side in case they win or something.
Yeah.
So there's this weird thing that the Chameleon is somehow, I don't know,
she doesn't necessarily know who's going to win.
Yeah. So I wonder
if at least Hildegrin doesn't think that she knows.
Right. And so if there's this sense that Aneri and the Hierodules and other people sort of are playing long-term manipulation games in the background, I get the sense that the Chameleon may not be part of that. She may be helping them inadvertently, but she's not got her finger on the pulse quite like
she
the rest
is a different kind of Cacogen, and there are a lot of different kinds of Cacogens.
Yeah, that is true. Yep.
So the chapter follows directly on from the last chapter, when Hildegrin reveals himself with such panache, and Severian finishes his business with Votalis. He says, "You may tell your master I delivered his message." And Hildegrin just smiles and asks if he has any messages to send back. He calls Severian Armiger, which Severian has told Agelus he is not. He also reminds him that he is from the Quercine Penetralia, which I guess means that Severian can trust him with classified information.
He says it like that, but then immediately after, that's when Dorcas speaks up and says, "I was told if somebody says that." And so I was wondering if that was another one of those code words.
Signals.
Like,
a code.
Not like, because I was wondering too. I'm like, is that a term that actually came up back with Votalis? I think it's more of a code word, like the Pelagic Argosy sales.
You may tell me. Okay. Yeah. Like a little signal that you may tell him. Yeah. Because as soon as Severian says, "I don't have any messages," and Dorcas says, "Oh, but I do." She says that the person she met in the gardens in House Absolute, who I think is the autarch, told her that she would meet someone who identified himself as from the Quercine Penetralia, and that she should tell that person, quote, "When the leaves are grown, the wood is to march north." And Hildegrin puts his finger beside his nose. People do that in books all the time. I'm sure you know what the gesture means, since it's it's what Santa Claus.
Santa Claus does. Yeah, exactly.
In the 19th century,
laying his finger aside of his nose.
Yes, yeah. But in the 19th century, it was basically a secret wink, like, keep this on the down low, or just between you and me.
Yep. The hobbits do it in Lord of the Rings too, when they're stealing the fireworks. I think Pippin does it to Merry. Yeah.
Right. Hildegrin says, "All the wood? Is that what he said?" But Dorcas says, "Look, I told you what he told me."
But one thing we should say, Quercine Penetralia. Quercine means like of an oak tree.
Mm-hmm.
And Penetralia seems like it, kind of what it is, like something that penetrates the inner circle is kind of how I read it. So it could just be a name for like the Votalis of the wood inner circle. It could be a way of.
It means he's from that's surely what he meant was. Yeah. Penetralia is the innermost parts of a building, especially like the sanctuary of a temple, the Holy of Holies, or in other sense, the most private secret parts, the recesses, the bowels of the ship, as they say in the movie Alien.
Cool. And I did not know that Quercine was a word for like of an oak or of trees, but there you go. I learned that today.
So Severian, who is behind, as he usually is, he's over here telling Dorcas, "Why didn't you tell me about this?" And Dorcas says, "Well, I hardly had an opportunity to talk up to you alone since we met at the crossing of the paths." And Craig, that's ridiculous. They talked about folk songs and Ouroboros legends. They marched through Pampas and even roasted a bull, but she has other reasons. She says, "Besides, I could see it was a dangerous thing to know. I couldn't see any reason to put that danger on you, Severian, with your sword and a guy who cuts people's heads off all the time. You can't. Don't worry, little Severian. I'll protect you."
And we know too that once we get into Sword, we're going to find out pretty quickly that Dorcas is pulling away. So this is a little bit maybe a foreshadowing of her eventual pulling back into herself. Like it's not that big a deal, but it is just one moment where, Severian is not her all and everything anymore, where she's just going to unload everything for him. She's starting to act on her own a little bit more, keep secrets from him basically. And so just a little point that in terms of her character, she's moving away a little bit.
Yeah. And I don't know, I guess rereaders would of course presume that it was the autarch who told her this. And she does say that it was the guy who gave Talos the money.
Yeah.
And she knows that the guy who she doesn't realize he's the autarch didn't tell that information to Talos. So, and Severian says, yeah, but he must have told you to tell me. She says, no.
Yeah.
But why didn't the autarch want Severian to convey this message?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't know. I mean, and I wonder if it has something to do with what it's about. Like, was he afraid that Severian was going to know? But there's no sense, I think, that he would necessarily want to keep secrets. I don't know. So it's one of those weird things that has the feel of like somebody manipulating something behind the scenes and wanting certain people to know something and not other. But I'm not sure. I mean, and especially since it's vague enough to just say like when the leaves change, the wood needs to move, which sounds like it, it has the sound of, especially if Vodalus and his people are of the wood. Yeah. Like, all right, you guys need to go north and attack, join the war or something.
Right. And when the leaves change, I guess that's maybe that's
could be the seasons. Yeah. It could literally be the season, but I don't know. Or the leaves could stand for something else. I don't know. But that's what it seems to be. But yeah, that's where it just gets too hard to tell. Like, well, would someone have told someone else? And so we're going to keep it secret from Severian by only telling it to the person closest to him in the world, right? You're like, yeah.
Well, maybe that wasn't the best way, but I think here's what I think. I think the autarch is already afraid that he's interfered too much in Severian's destiny, his timeline. He knows that Severian is supposed to meet him by natural course in the north, in the war. He's told Severian that he should go on as if he's going to take up his duties, convinced that he will do that in his heart. He wants Severian to act as much as possible as if he's never met the autarch, because House Absolute was not where they were supposed to meet. He tried to shortcut that situation before, and now he's trying to patch things up. So he doesn't want to use Severian as a conduit because he's convinced that's not how it happened for the, I'm going to say it's not how it happened for the first Severian, but it's not how it's supposed to happen. Just put it that way.
Interesting. And that potentially makes some sense. It's just to answer that question, there's so many if this is
what if that's the world I live in. So
yeah. But I think too, might be just this sort of sense of having them feel like they're pulled into some kind of conspiracy, so that they, stay a little bit confused and just keep moving in the directions they want them to. That seems like it could be something. Yeah. But
no, maybe he did. Maybe he assumed that Dorcas was going to tell anyway. And
Dorcas didn't know who he was then, but I would have to assume that they would assume that Severian would tell Dorcas who he was himself. Did he? Now I'm trying to think. Did I totally forget? Is there any place we actually see Severian tell Dorcas, hey, I think
no, he doesn't. He does not. He doesn't tell anyone this.
Okay. Okay.
So anyway, Hildegrin just chuckles and he has a sound in his chuckle that, quote, might have come from underground. And
so again, this whole big sense of Hildegrin being big and mountainous, and
kind of a reference to that thing under the Man-Apes cave. Yeah, right there. Also, possibly a sense of someone who has died, or a ghost, underground. I don't have an answer for what it means, but I want it to mean something. He says it doesn't matter, and he'd actually rather that Dorcas had waited until later to tell him rather than doing it in front of everyone. So I don't know. Of course, he'll never get around to delivering that message. So I guess the autarch will have to give it to someone else. But Hildegrin says that what matters is we're all friends here, except maybe for the sick girl. And I don't think she can hear what's said or understand what we're talking about if she could. What did you say her name was? I couldn't hear too clear when I was over there on the other side. And Severian looks at Jolenta in the light of the fire, and he sees that she is, quote, Jolenta no longer. Mm-hmm. Nothing of the beautiful woman Jonas had loved remained in that haggard face. Ouch. So I think she was bitten by a blood bat, and but Hildegrin seems to think that's implausible. He says, "A bat bite did that? They've grown uncommonly strong. Then I've been bit by a couple times myself." And Greg,
I like that you got Hildegrin being Australian. Cool.
Yeah, that or Hagrid from Harry Potter. Yeah,
that's kind of how I picture him. I do picture him a little bit that way. But and except in my head he's wearing like steampunk getup for some reason. I don't know. But
and a top hat. Most importantly, a top hat.
Yep, that's the thing that makes him steampunkish. Yeah. So, but the point there, it does seem like another one of those moments where it's something that happens and the characters kind of argue whether or not it's a physical cause or an emotional, spiritual kind of cause. And it seems like it's very well could be both. Like she could have been bitten by a bat, and that's just sort of the physical excuse for her to, give in.
She's falling.
She's just, and it's just the reason why she's so susceptible to it is because she's so depressed and despairing. Right. Could be, but it also does bring up that thing again. Did she try to kill herself, or was she bitten by a bat? Like that's the other, right. Yeah, that's the other ambiguity there.
I think we can agree. Hildegrin here is just talking about her change from the last time he's seen her, I guess. So, but this is one thing. He says he's been bitten a couple times by blood bats, so that's a solid strike against my robot Hildegrin theory.
Wait. Oh, Hildegrin says he followed him. That's how he saw her before. Because I'm like, she wasn't there in the lake. But then he says later, okay, yeah, never mind.
Not only that, but I kind of am coming to the belief that Talos and Baldanders were the people that Vodalis had keeping tabs on Severian. He says that they lost track of him after the Piteous Gate, and that would explain why they lost track of him.
That's interesting. I never quite made that connection. I always thought Talos and Baldanders were off on their own doing their own thing. But Dorcas does say it seems like they were always spying or looking for something.
Right, always looking for something. Which doesn't mean that's all there were. They working for
they got the, of course,
maybe they're working for Malrubius too. But
interesting. Okay.
But he does say that he was bitten a couple times by a blood bat, and that, Craig, is a solid strike against my robot Hildegrin theory. Woohoo! And Hildegrin at this point reveals to Severian mostly what Vodalis has already told him. After the Botanic Gardens, when Severian tipped his hand about knowing Vodalis, Severian told him that he was headed north. He knew he was going to a duel of a supposed officer of the Septentrians. He watched the duel. He helped catch Agelus, and he watched Agelus's execution. He watched the play in Catesson's Cross, where Equaster Malrubius, or maybe the actual Malrubius, who knows, was in attendance. He lost track of him at the riot at Piteous Gate, and now he can see that there's not much left of Jolenta except her hair, and he can see even that is fading. So, yeah. And Marin is anxious to show off what she knows about the mystery of Jolenta, and the Cumaean gives her permission to do it.
She has been imbued with a glamour that rendered her beautiful. It's fading fast now because of the blood she lost, and because she's had a great deal of exercise. By morning, only traces will remain.
No, well, that explains a lot, really. Yeah, she has lost blood. And she's always tired, right? She doesn't want to walk. She doesn't like to walk. It's not good. And, and then she's not getting her injections to make up for that. Yeah. So she's fading fast.
Glamour is such a cool word for that, because it could be spell, it could be.
It's a magic sound, but even Marin says, it's not magic. There's no such thing as magic.
Oh, and we get a little comment here of a little philosophical discussion about what counts as magic and how people define it and all that kind of thing. So it's a cool word here, because this is a great kind of Wolfe quote unquote explanation, because on the one hand, you've got characters saying, oh yeah, it's this thing, but it doesn't necessarily give you the full explanation. And there's even some areas in it that may mean something more than that. And then other characters think, oh, well, maybe it's also this other thing coming in. So it's such a cool moment of how Wolfe explains what happens, is that we get, again, all these possibilities that make sense, but it's not the kind of explanation that clearly lays out every little part of it. So it's just such a typical Wolfian moment, I think.
Yeah, and Dorcas says, do you mean they used magic on her?
And Marin says, there is no magic. There's only knowledge, more or less hidden.
Ah, the famous line.
Mm-hmm. So it's a version of Arthur C. Clarke's thing, right? About magic is only technology from that you start to understand or something. So
also, all of that exercise, that she's not supposed to have because it damages her beauty, that could explain why she passed out in the boat. Although, for me, it doesn't explain much else on the boat, but there's that. She's out walking all day with Severian, and she's exhausted. She's tired.
Yeah.
And Hildegrin looks at Jolenta and is impressed, and he says, I didn't know looks could be changed so much. That might be useful. That might. Can your mistress do it?
She could do much more than this if she willed it.
And Dorcas whispered, how did they do it?
And this is the Cumaean, right, who says, there have been substances drawn from the glands of beasts added to her blood to change the pattern in which her flesh was deposited. Those gave her a slender waist, breasts like melons, and so on. They may have been used to add calf to her legs as well. Cleaning and the application of healthening broths to the skin freshened her face. Her teeth were clean, too, and some were ground down and given false crowns. One has fallen away now, if you'll look. Her hair was dyed and thickened by sewing threads of colored silk into her scalp. No doubt much body hair was killed as well, and that at least will remain so.
So body parts were removed from her.
Mm-hmm.
If the witches saved her life, she'll ultimately, live out the rest of her life maimed.
Yeah. And when they talk about substances drawn from the glands of beasts, that could just mean extreme hormones, but it could also be something Alzabo-like that actually, had serious change. Yeah, it's one of those explanations that says one thing, but doesn't really say exactly what they mean. Like cleaning of her skin, right? Like cleaning.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I take it you mean something much more intense than just cleaning.
Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was. Maybe it's just
maybe.
It could be just beauty treatments as well as the other stuff.
It could well be, but it's just such a cool moment because it's never overly specific.
Right.
It's always a little vague. But yeah, dental work, all kinds of stuff. But that's not it. So most important, she was promised beauty while entranced. Such promises are believed with faith greater than any child's, and her belief compelled yours.
Ooh, great. Wolfe was a great believer in the power of suggestion, even the power of suggestion over people who encounter the one suggested.
Yeah. And so I'll harp on this line for a second because it does kind of go back to my pet theory about how New Sun is a world where there is no God until people start to make it. And then you actually do get some kind of divinity, because here it's a simple little thing of saying, if you're told you're beautiful, if you have that symbol in you that says, I am beautiful, then you will come to become that thing, even if you're not completely. So something about faith and belief here is transformative. And yeah, I know what they're saying is it could just be the simple thing of, hey, if you are confident, other people are going to perceive you as confident and have a higher image of yours. And it's,
right.
Apparently something with hypnotism and stuff like that. But that also could explain why once she feels like if she really was in love with Talus and that he's not around anymore, then if that confidence is gone, then all the rest of it kind of falls out. So,
yeah, it collapses. Yeah.
But I just like that little line there because it is in one sentence such a nice little connection to that larger idea that seems very similar to me about symbols make us.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dorcas asks if anything can be done to restore her. And Marion says she can't, that Marion can't, and it's not the kind of work that the command does. But, then will she live? And Marion says, the mother said she would, although she won't want to.
Yeah, so the command definitely has some wisdom here and at least just understands what people are going through somehow. Maybe it's because of how she can see time and, what different things people go through. She also just maybe smart in that way. She can get what people are going through.
So Hildegrin is ready to move on to what he came here for. He says, the armature here can help me fetch up this Apu Punchao. It appears the plan is to resurrect Apu Punchao and carry him bound up, tied up if necessary, to Vodalis. And Hildegrin had 2 helpers, but they got killed somehow on the trip here. Mm-hmm. But just as the Undines were trying to get Severian as an ally, Vodalis wants to enlist Apu Punchao, which is irony. And then the Kumeyan says she's ready. She says, the star is ascendant. All right, Craig, there's been a lot of discussion about this star. Mm-hmm. Let's wait on it.
Okay. Well, we will get to it. We promise.
In my head, by the way, I was thinking Hildegrin talks like Blackbeard the pirate. Or
more even in this one than he does in some other ones,
Or apparently George Washington, if the linguists I've been following are correct.
Yeah.
So Dorcas asks what we're all doing here, and Hildegrin says that the plan is bringing back the past, diving back into the time of Earth's greatness. There was someone who used to live in this place we're sitting on that knew things that could make a difference. I intend to have him up. It'll be the high point, if I may say, of a career that's already considered pretty spectacular in knowing circles. So my apologies to the pirates. So this is another resurrection job, just digging someone up who knew things. But here's the question. What did they expect to get out of him? But honestly,
I've been wondering that for a long time. Like, what were they going to get out of someone from a long time ago? Unless they had some sense that he wasn't just the guy from back then, but that he was some kind of time traveler. Because there is something about the story they tell about how he would go away and come back. And every time he came back, he would essentially, it sounds like, teach people how to do stuff, like either technology or something like that, which is in a way like what the Hierodules do, at least the way that they talk about Baldanders. And so I wonder if there's some sense that they thought he might be a candidate for that and that he would therefore teach them something else. Because otherwise, I have no idea what Vodalis would want from somebody from millennia ago, right? It's just so weird, like what Hildegrin and Vodalis would want. Like maybe they would want like leadership advice or something, it's like, but that seems like quite a stretch to go just to learn from someone. So that's why I started to think that they have to think that maybe he was some kind of time traveler. Like Hildegrin apparently knows that you can time travel, and that's why he goes to the Kumeyan to say, hey, do this for me.
Yeah, maybe the Megatherians have tipped them off. They're not telling him what he is or who he is, but they know that he is a big deal, and
could be that. Yeah,
they want just as the the Undines trying to get Severian by the river. Yeah, here's another means.
Yeah, so it could be that. But otherwise, I don't know. Like I was trying to rationalize what exactly would it be that they would want from this ancient legendary figure. And it does seem like he's more legendary than historical at this point. So
but if the Megatherians have just told them, this is someone who's a big deal, they don't have to ask questions, right?
Yeah.
They know. I mean, let's face it. Vodalis is digging up everybody in the Commonwealth. and he doesn't care. All he wants is, he just has this obsession with the past. It's kind of crazy.
That's true. It could be.
I could see him digging up people to get dirt on relationships in the House Absolute.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. And honestly, it never clicked until just now that that Hildegrin's going back maybe just to kill him and then eat him and learn from him that way, which
they're gonna get the information out of him one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's what they've been doing a lot of other kinds. So, because Hildegrin's very kind of violent with him. Like, they certainly don't go back in time and like try to talk to him. Like,
right.
like Hildegrin just rushes him. So,
I mean, I can see that if this had been successful, that by the time Hildegrin got back to camp, someone else would have arrived and would have rescued, Apu Punchau, Severian from Vodalis, and you'd have had a whole nother novel, a whole nother story of him on his way through Eskia or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's an odd question, and it leads into the same thing I was saying in the last one about like where motivations to me in these last couple chapters get very confusing, very suggestive rather than suggestive of things rather than relatively clear things that are just sort of talked about in esoteric ways. Like, yeah, the whole point behind going back to get Apu Punchau, I do not know.
Yeah. And once again, if the Megatherians know, who Apu Punchau was, it seems that the Kumeyan is at least fuzzy on it. She doesn't know everything. It's really interesting.
And I think too, from what I understand, like, because we know Severian's going to learn pretty quickly, and the Hierodules know that if you have two people meet in time, that they blow up or cause some kind of explosion or something.
Yeah.
She would probably know that too. And if she knew much about Apu Punchau.
But she doesn't know this fellow here, though.
No,
I know.
Maybe
she knows about Apu Punchau, but she doesn't know, or that she knows, if she doesn't know about him, she knows something about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so she knows where to find him, when to find him. But she doesn't know this kid who's standing here in front of her is this guy as well.
Although it seems like she should, if she can see the future of things too.
Well, I don't think she can see the future. I'll tell you, I don't. I can't remember if I talk about it, but we'll get into this a little bit later, I think. But what I think she sees is, think of this as like a mini worlds. Since not everyone likes my multi-universe things, but think of it as a mini worlds construction, like for Master Ash. She has knowledge of all of those iterations of her in those mini world branches in that garden of forking paths simultaneously. And so if Severian had come and revealed himself in one of those other branches, she would know. But unfortunately, he hasn't. He didn't. This is a one-off. This is unique.
Could be. And I think there's a part where when Marin explains how the Kumeyan experiences time, it sounds instead more like she just lives her own life simultaneously. And then they talk about why they have to get in touch with the star because the star has the ancient being that lived way back. So I don't know, because there's a way that I was reading it before that when you said that about not knowing the future, maybe I was like, oh, maybe she only knows her entire past and something, but they call her like a seeress, which seems like she'd be able to, like, the whole reason they come to her is because she can see things in the future.
Well, I don't know. She has knowledge of all of her other, of all of the events that happened in her lives and all her other lives. Then yeah, she's really a knowledgeable person because she knows all of the possibilities that might be going on at this time, but she doesn't know everything. She doesn't know the consequences of what she's doing, particularly if this is something that has never happened in any other circumstances. Her knowledge is useful and enlightening, but it's not all powerful. She doesn't know everything. She doesn't know the future. She doesn't know everything about the past.
Yeah.
But she is old and she knows a lot.
Unless she does know everything and is doing all this to have Severian bump into Apu Punchau. So
Wouldn't that be fun? I can't actually determine what was useful in that.
right. We're such helpful commentators. That all may be true, unless the opposite.
Could all be a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Well, so here they are performing a resurrection. And as in the first chapter of Shadow of the Torture, Severian encounters 3 people doing that work. Hildegrin, the Kamayan, who could be a stand-in for Vodalus, and Marin here. So here we are again. We've noted the structural parallels of this event and the exhuming of Barnock, the house tomb, the resurrection, the presence of in the Alcalde story of the Kamayan, or a Kamayan or the Kamayan. I'd probably say her presence is there based on that story of Mother Pyrexia. So here are also all the structural paragraphs to not only the first chapter of Claw, but also the first chapter of Shadow of the Torture, which I think is pretty cool.
Yep.
And considering that, there's Marin, who has been a candidate over the years for Severian's mother or sister, just like Thea in some sense. And I'll say that I've become increasingly attracted to the idea that the body in the grave could be Severian's mother as an earlier clone of Thecla. And I like that idea because of the overlays in this story with Great Expectations. Because, in the first chapter, as I said, Pip encounters a criminal and falls into league with him immediately. And where is Pip standing? In front of his mother's grave. But there is another formulation that I admit I don't like it because it bedevils my beautiful, carefully constructed explanation of this entire book. And that is that it is not Thecla who is a clone of his mother, but Thea, instead standing before his mother's grave. And he is standing before, her ghost. In fact, I guess both could be true. It would be an explanation for why Severian, while he loves Thecla, is so super turned on when Thecla resembles Thea, much more than Thecla alone. And he's attracted to false Thea, maybe more than false Thecla. Remember Severian getting turned on toward all the women right after his dream about his mother on the riverbank. It works as far as it goes, but Thecla as clone mother, sister. But anyway, it's something to put in our pocket.
Yeah.
But let's try it another way. Marin is a candidate for Severian's sister. And if Thecla is sort of his mother's sister, then Thea is his sister too. I don't know. Back to it. After what Hildegrin says they are doing here, he presumes they are digging up a body, nothing more than bones now, and the use of the Alzabo to extract the memories. And he says, "You're going to open a tomb?" But the Kamayan corrects him as she strokes Jolenta's forehead. "We may call it a tomb, but it was not his house, rather." And this is an interesting connection. It forces us, like I said, to remember exactly how much Wolfe thought about the events of Apu Punchau's death and entombment, and simply did not include it because he didn't think it artistically belonged, since Severian himself would not have direct access to that information, right? Mm-hmm. All of this doesn't ever come out until Earth of the New Sun. And it does feel like he had this idea in mind, right?
Yeah.
Then Hildegrin explains further, "You see, what with me working so near, I've been in the way to do this chatelaine a favour now and then. More than one, if I may say it, and more than two. Finally, I figured the time had come for me to collect. I mentioned my little plan to the master of the wood, you may be sure, and here we are." So it's inviting to imagine that the events of Apu Punchau are in our ancient past, in the ancient South America, since Apu Punchau is a myth in our time. But Michael Andre Druzy has argued that it has to be more recently because Severian sees a red sun when he is in that time.
Yeah, that's one trick that confuses things a lot. Because otherwise, I always think, yep, this is like he's in Machu Picchu. He's back in an Inca town, and that what we're talking about here, it seems like is like the beginning of the Inca civilization.
Yes.
But with the red sun, that That definitely confuses things.
Yeah. I mean, I find that intriguing, but it just seems unlikely.
Yeah.
Typhon gives us to believe that the dimming of the sun is only recently started in earnest, and Severian is able to use his new sun powers with ease in Typhon's time. But in Apu Punchau's time, for most of it, the new sun has not arrived. So I think this has to be in the ancient past. It cannot be when the sun is stricken. And I know there's a paradox there. I know there's a riddle to be solved with the red sun, but we have some time to worry about that. Question 2. Hildegrin says, "What with me working so near?" So Hildegrin has conferred with the Cumaean here on multiple occasions in the past, resurrecting the question, why did Father Aneres build the Garden of Endless Sleep? If the autarch could just go a little bit to the north and confer with her without any construction at all, or why not just go to the Witch's Tower? If anything, this is the most serious evidence that Severian is positively wrong in supposing that there is only one Cumaean and one assistant. It is entirely possible that there's only one face, that they all wear the same mask, but maybe there is one at the Citadel, and in the future Italy, and at Old Lake Avernus, and at the Garden of Endless Sleep. She lets the autarch confer with her, and the one north of the House Absolute. This one, it's one that the autarch doesn't confer with because she's less trustworthy. Maybe the other one is more powerful, influential, knowledgeable than the one here. Or maybe she does work for the autarch, but he uses her to feed the insurgency information and control them. I confess, I like that angle the least, but I don't know. All right, question 3. What sort of tasks has Hildegrin been performing for the Cumaean, and why did Wolfe never get around to writing the inevitably popular adventures of Hildegrin stories?
Yeah.
I mean, even by his own account, his adventures have been legendary. If this were a Universal Cinematic Universe or a Marvel Cinematic Universe, that there would be a separate Hildegrin movie out at some point.
Yeah.
So Severian says, "Hey, wait a minute. The Cumaean works for Father Aneres." And Hildegrin says, "She pays her debts. Quality always does. And you don't have to be a wise woman to know it might be wise to have a few friends on the other side, in case that's the side that wins." So
that thing about her not being completely committed to one side or the other, that she's willing to play both.
Well, she's got work, and she has to pay her people. So there's 2 ways of reading this. Either she works for Father Aneres to pay her debts and being allowed to remain on Earth. That's a common reading, but I don't like it because it doesn't seem to me that Father Aneres or the whole of the societies have that kind of power on Earth to banish a race of time manipulators from Earth. The other way of reading it is the one I favor. Hildegrin has helped the Cumaean out, tasks that could not presumably be performed by just anyone, and maybe they were tasks in the service of Aneres or the autarch, and now she owes Hildegrin a favor, and ethically she must pay. And anyway, why shouldn't she make friends with the Megatherians, as he said, as well as the autarch, just in case? But still, we have no hint of what relation the Cumaean and her special Commonwealth Bureau of Witches has to do with Aneres or the Ysatis. There's another potential series of stories that are open to us there. Look at this. I'm just pitching spinoff.
Yeah, you got
movies to crazy.
Working on the cinematic universe.
Yeah. But we still have the question of Hildegrin's comment, just in case that's the side that wins, because, it has never been determined what winning means here. Now, the consensus presumption among readers has always been that the Megatherians want to prevent the coming of the new sun. I see the point in that. The call day and solstice says that they are the enemies of the new sun. Hildegrin certainly believes he is an enemy of the autarch rather than working for him. And Hildegrin is surely aware that the Ysatis are the reason the autarchy exists, and they want the new sun because they conduct the tests.
Mm-hmm.
So, friend of my enemy is my enemy. Severian at this point, and for the first time, readers, heck, long-time readers, seem to assume that the Undine was luring Severian into the water to drown him. But the question there is still, why then she self-evidently saved Severian from drowning a year and a half ago or so in her own past, apparently. In addition, there's the play where Nod wants the first man of Earth, Messiah, to wed his daughter, and the prophet says the monsters like Nod come after the coming of the new sun. That said, it's entirely plausible to me that the Megatherians came from a universe iteration where the sun came, and now, in this iteration, they don't care at all if the new sun comes. They're going to live it up. I don't like that, but I have a conflict in my own mind. What it appears to me are the Megatherians' goals. A belief that is confirmed by what Baldander says of them in Earth, the New Sun, and what everyone in the Commonwealth, including Severian, seems to believe are their goals. And it is dissatisfying to me that there should be this rivalry set up inside this book, inside all these books, a rivalry that structurally runs through the books like a supporting beam running through the length of a house, just to have it not true, not that for the Megatherians not to actually be enemies of the new sun. But I think all the explanatory text, everywhere someone tries to explain what's going on, such as Baldander's, who after all does know a lot, or the play, which is screwy but likely based on deep knowledge. I don't know. You're all on your own on this one.
Yeah, it just, a lot of that, it starts to get way deep into speculation world. So it's just hard to know. And I still go back to wondering, it's worth thinking about whether or not there is supposed to be clarity among all that right here, or if Severian's just supposed to be getting caught up in all kinds of conspiracies and confusion. I mean, I don't,
conspiracies meet right
yeah,
here.
And I don't really like that one that much, but like I said, just things start to get so confusing here that I get confused.
Right.
So yeah, it's a little tautology for you, but it's all right.
So Dorcas asks all the right questions, and Severian theorizes. He rarely just asks. Dorcas asks because she's as smart as she is nice. And she asks the Kumeyan, who was this Apu Punchao, and why is his palace still standing when the rest of the town is only tumbled stones?
Yep.
And the Kumeyan doesn't answer. But Marin, the student, with her hand always up in class, she explains.
Less than a legend, for not even scholars now remember his story. The mother has told us that his name means the head of day. In the earliest eons, he appeared among the people here and taught them many wonderful secrets. Often he vanished, but always he returned. At last he did not return, and invaders laid waste to his cities. Now he shall return for the last time.
Now a careful reader should recognize that this way of appearing and disappearing and reappearing is also reminiscent of both the Claw and the Conciliator. But after all, no one is as smart as Wolfe expected us to be.
Yeah. Also here, that thing when he says, and taught them many wonderful secrets. Like, again,
Yeah.
that's pleasantly vague.
Yeah.
It could be like secrets about what? Technology, about life, about what? Yeah. So we don't know. But
it does seem that the witches have not connected Apu Punchao to the Conciliator themselves.
Right.
Or how much do they know? I mean, are they walkers in time? We don't really know. They're kind of they're time travel adjacent.
Yeah.
But can they themselves travel in time? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not even clear that Marin could. She talks about how the Kumeyan can, but yeah, it's not sure. I'm not sure if that means that Marin can too, or if she's just here to help. If that makes sense.
So he did all these things. Dorcas says, "Oh, really, Marin?" And he did all these things without magic.
And the Kumeyan looked up at Dorcas with eyes that seemed as bright as the stars. Words are symbols. Marin chooses to delimit magic as that which does not exist, and so it does not exist. If you choose to call what we are about to do here magic, then magic lives while we do it. In ancient days,
In a land far off, there stood two empires, divided by mountains. One dressed its soldiers in yellow, the other in green. For 100 generations they struggled. I see that the man with you knows the tale.
Yeah, Severian knows the story, and he pipes up. Yeah, after 100 generations, an eremite came among them and counseled the emperor of the Yellow Army to dress his men in green, and the master of the Green Army that he should clothe in yellow. But the battle continued as before. In my sabertash, I have a book called The Wonders of Earth and Sky, and the story is there. Yeah, this is from the Brown Book story, Empire of Foliage and Flowers, which was not included in this novel.
Nope.
It was only finally included in the limited edition of Planet Engineering Collection. But now you can get this story in the easily obtainable Star Waters Strain Collection, which also includes a secret Book of the New Sun story from the cradle.
And the point of the story, at least as they're putting it here, and it definitely gets more complicated in the one that Wolfe actually wrote, but the way they present it here seems like the point of the story is 6 of one, half a dozen of another.
Yeah.
Right. Where
yeah, exactly.
And that's what she's kind of saying about magic. She's like, if you call it magic, then fine. But you can also think that, again, that thing about magic being just technology by another name or something. So yeah, it's another point where, it's not like we're saying here that, yes, the world is actually magical. It's not that there may be mysteries. It just may be that what you don't know right now you call magic.
Or it might be more magic than you know. Yeah.
It's another one of those things that certainly is not meant to exactly clarify.
Yeah. But she says that words are symbols, and which is true. Symbols
straight out says it too,
yeah.
Which is nice that we get that actual phrase.
Oh yeah, we get it. Once again, another connection to the first chapter.
Yep.
And but words as symbols means that symbols can change what they mean. They can mean different things. They can mean opposing things. They can mean over time. They can mean one thing, and in another sense, they mean another. So, which is something you should remember when you start, saying, who said that? Hitler. Yeah, that's true. Hitler said some things, but you know what? He probably most things he said, he didn't mean what the person you're talking to meant.
Yeah,
and also, of course, the whole thing about symbols make us, right.
Yep.
And the words we choose to use about things also frame who we are, what we think, what we believe.
Yep.
The Empire of Foliage and Flowers they switch clothes, and then they continue the fight. Right. In America, we call this the War of the Democrats and Republicans. Oops, ignore that. We don't get political here.
Not modern political. So, regarding the book of the Wonders of Earth and Sky, the Cumean says, that is the wisest of all the books of men, though there are few who can gain any benefit from reading it.
The Cumean makes a wry joke, complimentary as well. She says, child, explain to this man who will be a sage in time what we do tonight.
So right then, Marin explains, all time exists. That's the truth beyond the legends the epochs tell. If the future did not exist now, how could we journey toward it? If the past does not exist still, how could we leave it behind us? In sleep, the mind is encircled by its time, which is why we so often hear the voices of the dead there and receive intelligence of things to come. Those who, like the mother, have learned to enter the same state while waking live surrounded by their own lives, even as the Abraxas perceives all of time as an eternal instant.
Oh, man. So much here. In context, Marin's use of Abraxas is another term for the Encreate, specifically that it's a Gnostic concept, and Severian's world might be casually Gnostic, but the witches are doctrinal Gnostics.
So it seems, yep.
Yeah, and the Abraxas is an interesting term in Christian syncretism. Earliest reference that we have of this term is from Christian catalogers of heresy. Bishop Irenaeus, writing in the late 2nd century, said that the Abraxas was, quote, the unbegotten father, the tippy top of the cycle of eons and archons that finally create the first heaven from which there is another series that creates a second heaven, and a process continues until 365 heavens are created. And obviously, this sort of Gnosticism is deeply in line with the concept of true myth in Hamlet's Mill, in which true myth is ultimately a metaphor for cosmology. And I'm going to try to keep this at a high level. The earliest named Christian Gnostic teacher was Valentinus, who lived for most of the 2nd century, but it might have been, an earlier provenance, and might be referred to in Paul's epistle, 1 Timothy, where it says, "Neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies which minister questions, rather than godly edifying, which is in faith. And also pay no heed to knowledge falsely so called, which by professing it, some have deviated from the faith." The point is that the Abrastic is the Gnostic vernacular equivalent of the Increate. And as well as I can, I'm suppressing making this a Gnostic / Hamlet's Mill chapter. So ostensibly, this description of Marin about time is merely the Einsteinian concept of all time as existing simultaneously and merely being a matter of direction from our perspective. And honestly, this must be presumed to be true for time travel to exist at all. However,
in some way or another. Yeah.
Right. However, I think she's talking about something quite different. Like I said, where she talks about the mother, the Kumeyan, being in a state where she can access all her time while awake.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be. Yeah.
Yeah. In sleep, the mind is encircled by its time, by the mind's time, which is why we so often hear the voices of the dead there.
Yeah. So it's more about, it seems like the Kumeyan can perceive all these different times.
Of herself.
Apparently of herself. And we're going to find out why. That's why they have to go to this creature on the star that can remember all kinds of this. But we'll get there. But then what's weird is that she can actually take other people with her. Like that's
or she recreate that world. Right.
And that's the other question that I always wondered. Like for a long time, I thought, well, they don't actually travel here. They're just kind of going back to view it, because the whole thing about like the sort of way that the dust comes back and whatnot, it seemed such dreamlike to me in a certain way, but I'm not so sure that's the case anymore. But I wondered about that. Like, does she actually take you there, or does she just help you see what's going on?
I think
but they apparently go there because, like, I mean, Hildegrin can actually grab Apple Punch. So,
yeah, but I don't know. Maybe we should before I start theorizing, maybe we better get there, I guess. I have a lot of different ideas about what's going on there, but
I will say too, one thing, and I'll say it here so I don't forget it, but one thing about this description, it also makes me wonder. I've often thought, the Kumeyan, when he sees her in her true form, it's like a snake. But now I wonder, is she really something else, or is she a human who just, when you see all of her different parts existing at the same point, she does look like a snake, because you just see in like traces, like you literally see like, well,
it's something like Slaughterhouse-Five, right? We were talking about the way the aliens see humanity, where they seem just to make a long trail.
Yeah. Maybe, and I was wondering that there could be something to that too.
So there was not a lot of breeze that night, but Severian notices that even the little breeze that was there has stopped. So Dorcas's voice just seems to boom in the palace. She says, "Is that what this woman you call the Kumeyan will do then? Will she go into trance like a medium in a seance?" Marin seems to imply that is something that she theoretically could do, but she won't.
She cannot. She is very old, but this city was devastated whole ages before she came to be. Only her own time rings her, for that is all her mind comprehends by direct knowledge. To restore the city, we must make use of a mind that existed when it was whole.
So let me try to work out what this means. Marin seems to be saying that the only way the Kumeyan could speak with the voice of the dead is if that person lived during her lifetime, right?
Seems to be, yep.
Right. So normally she could, but not in this case, for a variety of reasons. And it's like she has a memory like Severian's, but she knows everything that's happened, and she can spool it out like Severian does. It's a matter of memory. And because of that, in order to answer Hildegrin's questions, they need a mind that has access to the time, the specific time of the mind that they want to contact, which I guess existed before the Kameian was born, right?
And the next question that seems to come up is, well, are we just talking about anything that happened during the time you were alive? Which seems like that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be something that you actually experienced. Right.
Right. Exactly.
That's the way I was.
Oh, you think really? Yeah. You think?
Well, I think so. Cause otherwise it's implying that whatever this thing in the star millions of light years away was, it's saying it has to be something that mind in that star actually experienced. And that's where I get confused about.
All right, I have a theory about that.
Well, so if you're thinking that's Severian,
no, and that is often the thought. I do not believe that that's Severian. That doesn't make any sense at all. Unless Severian is sitting
unless
there
it was like it's his son that they're
like
literally like that was the star. I don't think that's what it is, but it does seem like there's the way I took it was that no, you got to have some mind that's alive at the time it seems like it's hard to tell.
Yeah, but like you said, they need a mind, that can access the specific time that they want to contact. They're conjuring ghosts, but it's really a matter of communicating across time. They aren't connecting with a specter of a mind in the present. They're going to reach across time, contact a mind in its own time in the past. I know I'm not really clarifying anything here.
So the Kameian says, in the world? No, yet such a mind exists. Look where I point, child, just above the clouds. The red star there is called the fish's mouth, and on its one surviving world there dwells an ancient and acute mind. Marin, take my hand, and you, Badger, take the other. Torturer, take the right hand of your sick friend, and Hildegrin's. Your paramour must take the sick woman's other hand, and Marin's. Now we are linked, men to one side, women to the other.
Yeah, they begin the seance, which feels a lot like Christmas Inn, which we discussed about, right?
Yep.
So let's see if we can figure out this fish's mouth part, because frankly, that goes in a lot of directions. They can only do all this when that star is in view in the sky. I think the star is Fomalhaut, which is known as fish's mouth. There's been a lot of speculation that maybe this is Severian's star. This is the white fountain, but I think this could only be true if that white fountain has a planet orbiting around it. So let's put that aside and let's assume that this ancient and acute mind is not some version of Severian, because I don't like the everyone is Severian theories. Maybe it's just some very old, very omniscient mind. Maybe it's a machine that they have running constantly. And it's been running for eons, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's basically like as if you had a living Kameian, but it's something that all of the Kameians can draw upon if they need to. So let me think about this a little. We have a mind on the planet orbiting the red star fish's mouth. I feel like there is a consensus that the star fish's mouth is known. It doesn't mean it's true, but I think we should go over why it's believed to be known. There's a star, brightest star in the southern Pisces constellation. Southern Pisces, the southern fish, a red dwarf star called Fomalhaut, which means mouth of the fish. Actually, it literally means mouth of the whale, but honestly, I doubt that matters here. It's the mouth of the fish of the constellation. It's also, according to Ptolemy, a star in the constellation Aquarius, the water bearer. So it is sort of a mediator between the constellations. I think mediator and conciliator are intended associations, as I've said before. Also, Fomalhaut is a relatively close to us, only 25 light years away. But in, say, 30,000 years, just picking a random number, as how far Severian is in our future, it'll be around 65 light years away. Interestingly, since we've been talking about a planet around Fomalhaut, this star was the first to have a believed exoplanet that was directly observed. And that was 26 years after the publication of Claude the Conciliator. So clearly, Wolfe had been doing some post-historical research. And since then, its status as an actual exoplanet has been cast in significant doubt. but who cares? Now, the Kumeyan says there's a mind on this star's soul planet, an ancient acute mind. On the Earth list and Reddit, B. Sharp, Lee Berman, has long associated Fomalhaut with both the Jurupari, whose image Agia was scratching on the floor of Agilus's cell, and the thing in the Man-Ape's cave, and the Ouroboros, whose myth Dorcas mentioned when the people walk into his mouth thinking it's a cave. Because the Jurupari is also a kind of fish, and the Jurupari of Amazonian mythology, in one story, opens his mouth, tricking some youths into thinking he's a cave. And that is a lot to connect. So I like that. Good on you, Lee. However, Lee has not been able to develop the association between the Jurupari myth, the cave, the Megatherium, and the star to an extent that I could draw a narrative from it. Now, I could develop a narrative where the mind on Fomalhaut is a Megatherium and the thing in the Man-Ape cave, but that is just writing an entire novel without clarifying how anything has to do with Severian. But if you're interested, his theory can be found by searching the Earth list or Reddit. Now, back to other theories. Imagining this mind as a branch off from Severian is enticing. It's not like Apupunchau itself. Would not require a great deal of inductive reasoning by the reader to figure it out if Wolfe had never written Earth of the New Sun. But a simpler solution, I think, and I'm looking for a simpler solution because as far as I can tell, Wolfe did not more clearly identify it. A simpler solution is that, like I said, it's not even a mind at all.
Which would be weird, too, for them to say, this is how this works, and now we're going to do something that just isn't even like that at all.
Yeah, well, it's like an ancient AI. They can we call them minds as well. We call them intelligences.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And so they use this ancient AI to use all kinds of their witchy abilities, and that ancient AI has been running, since the time of Apupunchau, who was buried in his house, gathering data on all the major events in the world and all of the different times as well, all of the different timelines. So it, perhaps collects and collates all the lives of all the Kumeyan's people. So if we're going to construct, to infer, to induce how this mind the Kumeyan is referring to works to come up with something concrete, then this makes the most sense to me. I don't recall this solution ever being theorized before, so I'm trademarking it. It definitely simplifies things. The next issue I think that needs to be covered is Apupunchau. Now, because everyone is listening to us has read Earth of the New Sun, it's confirmed that this fellow, the Kumeyan, is going to resurrect is Severian himself in one sense or another. But I wonder, after anyone has read that coda to this book, whether they're able to put themselves back into the mindset where they were, where they're trying to grapple with how unclear it was when the Book of the New Sun was all they had. How could it be, as Severian claimed, that the tomb in the necropolis was his own and that this fellow entombed in Earth's deep history and seemingly obliterated at the end of the Claude Conciliator could also be Severian?
Yep.
And that, friends, is what is expected from us in this book. I truly think it is not possible to comprehend the greater backstory of this novel, which I think Wolfe fully imagined, without inductive reasoning. Deduction is just not enough. You cannot eliminate the possible until only the necessary remains. You are expected to tell some kind of little story. I had this same conversation on separate occasions with Mark Aramini and with another person online about this. This other person said, no, I don't think the story can only be deduced. So eventually we got around to discussing the first Severian, as I always do. And he eventually said, well, I think Severian was wrong about the first Severian and his past, which of course diverges from our Severian in key places. And I said, well, then at least we agree that inductive reasoning is necessary to understand this book, because I'm reading the last chapter of Citadel of the Odd Tark deductively, and I'm taking what Severian says and I'm eliminating the possibilities and that contradict the passage. And you're reading it inductively. You're concluding that Severian was mistaken. And to his credit, this person said, fair point. So we need to, here we are. We need to read this inductively. What do you think? Is this the place to end this story, Craig? I think
as far as this part goes, we started to lay out some stuff about the Cumaean. We started to lay out some stuff about the mechanics of this situation. And yeah, what we know about Apu Punchau, we're going to see a few things. And there are some maybe hints in what happens with what Severian sees as things start to come back a bit. But really, the most we get is going to be Earth of the New Sun, like, because the rest of this chapter is very short. And everything else that we're going to be doing is basically just trying to figure out, well, what could we figure out from calling this guy Apu Punchau and that he lives in a stone town in some hills, which might be Machu Picchu or might be like Machu Picchu or in something kind of Incan, but maybe not. I mean, we're going to run up against a whole lot of questions like that. So
let's talk about, so this Apu Punchau guy, let's try and talk about him just from what we could know from this particular book all by itself.
Chapter, yep. And what we get is his name,
okay,
and what we can guess about him as maybe an Incan figure, like, because that's kind of what I always assumed here, is that this is some kind of Incan leader, and that we're in, if not actually Machu Picchu, something a lot like Machu Picchu.
Yeah,
maybe even
one of the other stuff, right? One of the other major
and
cities.
Possibly even something like far in the beginning of Inca's beginnings, like something that where maybe the Incan Empire came because of all of the secrets that Apu Punchau would come give all these people, which is eventually kind of what we get in Earth and New Sun. It seems like, to me at least. But
I think it's very possible this could be like 1000 AD, and I have a lot of reasons. Right.
And if you look online, there's a lot of people who argue about whether Apu Punchau happens in between our time and Severian's time, or I feel like it's got to be, given the South American stuff, given the name, given everything here. It just seems like a whole lot of work Wolfe's going through to suggest, without ever coming around and saying this is South American and things you might recognize, only to say, no, I really mean something totally different, which he's done things like that before, but I don't think that's what this is.
Yeah. Apu Punchau, I mean, you could go to the library back in 1983 and have looked up Apu Punchau and found out all kinds of things about Apu Punchau, right?
Yeah.
They've already told us his name means the head of the day. It's another name for the sun god Inti, which was the official religion of the Incas until the culture and empire was toppled, probably by the European cold and flu viruses. Inti was the sun, and he represented order and justice. Inti was married to the moon, Koya, or Mama Kilia, who was the patroness of time. So here we have a picture of Severian, Guild of the Seekers of Truth and Penitence, and Valeria, who was the mistress of the Atrium of Time. And in this, it reminds me of the analogy of the Greek god of the sun, Hyperion, whose name means he who goes before. He married his sister Titanus Thea, and his son was the god Helios. So Apu Punchau also has a son, Manco Capac, and a daughter, Mama Otsilo, who married each other after a worldwide flood and repopulated the earth. In other tellings, Mama Clio was Apu Punchau's sister, and therefore Manco Capac's aunt. And they, by the most common stories, emerged from a cave at Lake Titicaca, which bears an uncanny resemblance to Lake Diaturna. So for me, Craig, all these mythical threads are interwoven into Severian's story, and Thecla's, and Thea's, and Valeria's. Machu Picchu, as you said, was one of the holy places dedicated to Apu Punchau. Inti was said to have foretold a death that would end the dynasty of the sun's descendants in the Incan Empire, and also all the Incans, since they were descended from Inti. In other words, like the Conciliator, he preached the coming of the new sun and the destruction of Earth. Another parallel to the Commonwealth is that Incans had to be purified just to travel between cities to intercities. just like the roads are closed in the Commonwealth. And now the veneration of Inti, of Apu Punchau, has not gone away. Inti seems to have been a holy trinity, one of whom was Inti's son, Manco. Catholic Quechua people today often associate Inti with Christ or with God the Father. The festivals that honor Inti, the Inti Rayma, were celebrated with animal sacrifice and ritual dance, and they were originally held in June and now are held in May or June, so they always coincide with the Feast of Corpus Christi. Inti is the son of the creator of the world. The point is that having Severian go back into deep time to become the originator of the Inti religion, the religion of Apu Punchau, is as much a Christological reference as Severian changing water into wine. So I don't want to get into a debate with Mantis on here about the location, because we can take that up when we get to Earth and the New Sun in a few years. But I should say that Apu Punchau's placement, Severian as the potentially origin of that religion, all this for me just makes the idea that this does not take place, say, around 1000 AD or earlier, but instead in our possibly distant future. For me, this just makes that construction difficult to sell. Mm-hmm. It makes it hard for me to accept just on a plot level, as much as it frustrates me thematically. But we don't have to worry about that, as I say, until the impossibly distant future when we cover those chapters. So, sheesh, Craig. You know what? We're not even halfway through this chapter.
Been helping my son with one of his college papers, and he was complaining that he's already hit his word limit on one and still hasn't started saying what he wants to say. And I'm like, yep, you got to get all that throat clearing out of the way. Then you feel better. Then you know what's going on. That's pretty much, we're doing a lot of throat clearing with this one.
This is the big throat clearing episode. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, that's a lot of setup. And then we're going to actually get to the fun little encounter, along with some trippy visuals that we get beforehand, but which might actually give us some insight into what's going on maybe when we time travel here, because we're not just doing it from the walking paths that we normally get. We're actually doing some very different crazy stuff. But yeah, there's going to be a lot there, and I've got some questions and I think some maybe interesting conclusions about what it means that Severian halfway through this book connects to Apu Punchau. And I think the big thing, of course, is that we finally get Severian clearly identified with someone who is pretty clearly a sun god that you can, he's at the very least, he's called the head of day. Severian, there's another guy over there, he snaps, and then all of a sudden Severian is grappling with a Hildegrin who is just doing him, all of which is to say, I think you're supposed to realize at the end of this book, the big takeaway is, hey, wait a minute, is Severian this old sun god somehow? I think that's supposed to be.
Is that possible to happen?
I think so. I think you're supposed to at least have enough here to suggest it. Now, I got to admit, when I first read it, I don't think I caught any of that. I was like, that was weird. Let me go read the next.
I was just so glad to get through.
I was like,
the Conciliator. Yep. Yeah.
But I do think, we're halfway through the 4 books. I do think Wolfe intended us to really see some kind of identification here. At least in the way the structure of the book goes, but we'll talk about that. That's where we got to get. But how can we?
But how would we can play? Yeah, but how would we ever have justified that claim? I'm imagining someone making this pitch on the Earth list, and I can imagine all the people saying it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. There's no reason to assume that.
No, and we can talk about how the actual sentences work when we get to the very end, but just from the fact of Apu Punchau being head of day. And then the way that the only way to me, the very end of the chapter literally makes sense from what Severian describes is at the one moment he sees Hildegrin fighting with some guy. Then all of a sudden he says, I was hit in the head in the scramble, which may or may not be what really happened. It may instead be that, the explosion or whatever happened. And next thing is Hildegrin's got his arm around him, but there's another Hildegrin fighting with someone he can't see. And that's pretty much where it ends. So the image that you get all of a sudden is Severian sees Hildegrin and this other guy who looks like his tomb thing smack. Something happens in his head, and then all of a sudden the other guy's gone. But now there's a Hildegrin with his arm around Severian.
Right. But it's
That's
all
enough.
but it's all so obvious once you know that.
Once you know it's true. But I think I think he very much was intending it to be very weird. But if you pay attention to, okay, at the very least, what is it that I would see if Wolfe is describing? You do have that thing of, okay, the parallel of Hildegrin fighting with that dude, smack. Now that dude's gone, but there's a second Hildegrin on me. That's enough to make you think, wait a minute, you have no idea what it is. Did I just become that other guy? Did he just become me? Did I just trade places with him? I mean, who knows? It could be all those kinds of things. It's never clear. Like, there's not enough here to say.
Man, you're making me think of all the alternative theories in a world without Earth.
All those things
Earth is the new
are
sun.
possible. But at the very least, I think it raises the question of, is Severian this head of day guy somehow too? We don't know whether he just became him, whether he became him in the past, whether something else weird is going on, whether he just looks like him a lot. We don't know, but I do think there's enough in there. If you're not like just rushing to say, get on to the next chapter where you actually explain some of this stuff, which I'm sure is how I read it and most people, there's enough there to, I think, to at least get that, but no explanation for it, but at the very least to make you think, are those the same dudes? What would that mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, we are going to explain, we're going to try and explain it all next episode. So, but there's still a lot to chew on here. There's still a lot for us to gnaw on.
I feel like the Cumaean is even more confusing to me now.
The more you look at it, the more weird and paradoxical the whole thing becomes.
And also just because I can't put her on a side exactly. Like I feel like if I'm thinking in terms of the books being set up between humanity versus Megatherians, or Hierodules versus Megatherians, or Enire trying to help the Hierodules versus the Megatherians, then I feel like it can line people up on different sides. At this point, I'm not exactly sure where the Cumaean would fit in any of that. So maybe it is just that the witches they're just doing their own thing. Like
maybe it's like Game of Thrones, where it's not about a side. You have everybody
maybe
scrambling. It could be a free for all.
It may be, but I definitely think that the Cumaean is in some way, for whatever reason, she's doing her own thing. And she even does have, we didn't talk about it a lot, but she does make that one sort of cryptic comment at some point where she's like, once you have enough wisdom, you don't think you can really control anything. Right.
Yeah,
which is very different from how the Hierodules act, right? They're all about, we're going to manipulate the entire race for evolution and whatnot. But she's got a much more, I don't necessarily want to call it Buddhist, but it's definitely much more of a hands-off kind of thing. She's like,
it's a crazy world that Severian is walking in, when a being like the Cumaean is just a bit player.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yep. So that's where I feel like she comes down, that she, maybe there's not in the book enough information for Wolfe to actually tell us what she is, and she really is just another player in a much more complicated world where there are lots of other things going on. That may well be it.
Yeah.
And the fact that she knows about this other creature or mind or whatever on Fomalhaut, maybe that's another
she's heard of it. It's a legendary creature. We've all heard about him. We don't really know anything about him.
Maybe it really is a point to say, yep, and there's all this other stuff going on in the world.
And she's not checking back with the Home Office. Maybe if she had just done that, they said, hey, okay, there's a lot of things we got to read you in on about this guy.
Which does a couple things for the book. It makes you think, okay, well, maybe this whole like big central drama of humanity's evolution, maybe it's not that important to the world. Like you get the sense sometimes that, this is what all of history is about, is humanity going. But if there's all this other stuff going on, maybe it really is just, that's just the humans doing their thing. And that's weirder, because that means that all the religious imagery and whatnot is not quite so universally powerful as it suggests that it is. Or maybe not. You got
to think of it from a Christian point of view, where events that turn the whole world happen in one small backwater Palestine.
Yeah. So I do think that if you bring in all this stuff with like, by the way, there's all this, Like if you say like, okay, the Christian story is happening here, but also there's all this other stuff that doesn't care a bit about God. That's weird.
Yeah.
That's like, that's very weird. Okay.
Yeah, we know the politics of Ischia to the north, but there's a whole nother planet going on out there. There are other, underwater forces who are, playing their own game. Yeah. Strange. Well, what do you know? what do you think? We would like to hear from you. We want to hear from you all about our errors, all about the things we missed and how we could have, turned the die 90 degrees and got a different perspective on it. So just reach out to us with your compliments, your comments, your corrections, your complaints on Facebook, Reddit, email, Twitter, YouTube, Master Patron, Slack channel, on the Patreon channel itself, via email, Instagram. However you do it, please do it. And if you're enjoying it, and by now, if you've got to this point and you aren't enjoying it, please reach out to us and tell us what the heck is wrong with you. But assuming you are enjoying it, then, let your wolf reading friends know about it by whatever means it is that you do that kind of thing. And until you hear from us next, and we'll still be sitting here in the Stone Town, may the Moira favor you.
I feel like I should say adios or something since we're back in. But I don't know what the actual... No, that would not be the Incan word at all. I don't know what I'm thinking. What would the Incan word for goodbye be?
I don't know Peru. Yeah, I don't know.
I'll go find out. I'll find out and edit it in.
Tupananchis kama. Tupananchis kama.
Feel free to edit freely. And if you want to move a whole thing, you can just chop it up so that things go in all sorts of directions. I don't care. As long as it's my voice saying it, that's okay. Eventually makes fun of her, and she gives up and admits Hildegrin. I've got a dog in the background.
Puppy dog. Hello.
You done, kid? I'm watching my daughter's dog. The requirement that it be these people is pivotal. Let's try again. Is pivotal. that it be these people is pivotal.
All right, sorry about that. I just realized I
had to pee.
I'd have done that before we started. Just forgot. So
sometimes we never know. I don't like this. We already talked about it. We already just dispensed with this. God, wow, I've got so much garbage. I think he doesn't work for Bodilus exclusively. I knew it.
Okay, so let's click start.
He tried to be nice about it, but he says, "Hey, you guys need to get back on it."
Yeah, I know you're doing it for fun, and it's a passion project. But
well, it's just this job, it's not the time anymore. Because there was a while where it just seemed to take up all the time. Now, it's just that it takes up a lot of attention and forces me to think about it a lot.
Yeah, I got you.
So the time that I would normally spend thinking about what I'm going to say here. So
no, I get it. When mine actually gets busy, it's kind of the same thing. What I used to say about my job is that once you've taught the courses a few times, it leaves a ton of extra emotional and intellectual energy for anything else you want to do. But yeah, lately it's just like, it's just been exhausting. And also she got me a copy of October 1965 Sir magazine. Oh, that's fun.
I put that in Instagram.
So I'm curious, the rest of that one, is it like a Playboy, or is it just suggestive?
It's very much like that. It's they have a centerfold, and they have basically, it's not like, it's more like Playboy than Penthouse.
Gotcha.
Does have an interesting article about Ford in the Le Mans. So
interesting. Well, Playboy published some really high profile stuff.
And high profile interviews. They were
back in the interviews and fiction. And they got, like, Robert Anton Wilson actually worked as an editor for Penthouse for a while.
Right. That's where the big money was in these short stories.
Yeah.
In fact, Jack Dan mentioned that, right?
Yeah.
It's about how if you could get them, and if you get a story in one of their magazines, you get paid like $2,000.
Yep.
But in this one, it has an illustration for Wolfe's story, the Dead Man. I don't really think it much applies to the story. Yeah, it's got a buxom girl and a guy, I guess, going. I don't know. I guess he's going on his way to heaven, to the afterlife or something.
I'm sure in that one, it's they wanted was full on Frazetta stuff. So
Well, it's not really Franzetta. It's not fantasy. It's more like it's more like a modern noir kind of right. But yeah, I'm sure anyone looking at that illustration say, "Oh wow, I got to get this story. Check out this story." It was like, "What the heck is?"
This is puzzling. It's like you have to search to find the eroticism in this one.
Yeah, a guy eaten by a crocodile. So. But yeah, that was really nice. Very, very, very nice. So now I have a literary artifact that Gene Wolfe didn't have.
Yeah.
Because Rosemary wouldn't allow that one in the house. So
that's hilarious. That's awesome. You're inching towards, I don't know if it's possible to have a complete collection, but you are inching towards it.
I don't have all of his first publications, obviously. But I got almost all of his uncollected stuff so far. So not quite.
That is really cool.
Weren't there 3 of you a minute ago? And Maren goes off on, oops.